The sharp click of the combination lock on a suitcase holding $2 million in cash was the final sound that killed the innocent woman I was yesterday. Lance, the man who had knelt before me just 2 weeks ago, now stood counting stacks of bills with the eyes of a starving animal. He thought he had sold a helpless lamb to a monster, never realizing that this silver pendant around my neck was actually his one-way ticket to hell. My name is Jeanette Norcross, and until 24 hours ago, I believed that the greatest tragedy of my life was the dull, gray monotony of a data entry job in rainy Seattle. I was 24 years old, filled with a naive hope that the universe owed me a happy ending. I was wrong. The universe owes us nothing. And right now, staring into the pitch-black void of a shipping container that smelled of rancid oil and the salt of the sea, I realized that my tragedy had not even begun until the man I loved decided to liquidate his assets. And I was the asset. The darkness was absolute. It pressed against my eyes, heavy and suffocating, making it impossible to tell if they were open or closed. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache, likely the aftermath of whatever drug had been slipped into my champagne the night before, or was it morning time had lost its meaning in this metal box? The ground beneath me was cold, corrugated steel that bit into my hip and shoulder. I tried to move, but my wrists were bound tight behind my back with plastic zip ties that cut into my skin with every small struggle. My ankles were similarly secured. Panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in my chest, but my mind, desperate for safety, retreated into the past. It fled back to the golden light of yesterday. I remembered the sun. The Mexican sun was different from the weak light back home. It was fierce and possessive. We were in Cabo, or at least a secluded resort just outside of it. Lance called it our early honeymoon. He had been so romantic, sweeping me off my feet right in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, telling me to pack a bag because he could not wait another minute to celebrate our engagement. Lance Sterling. Just saying his name in my mind brought a phantom ache to my heart. He was the golden boy, a tech entrepreneur with a smile that could disarm a bomb and eyes that made you feel like the only person in a crowded room. He had saved me. That was the narrative I told everyone. He plucked me from my cubicle life, from the endless spreadsheets and the lonely microwave dinners, and introduced me to a world of private jets, 5-star dinners, and whispered promises. But looking back now, through the lens of this terrifying darkness, I saw the cracks I had willfully ignored. Throughout the trip, Lance had been on edge. He spent hours on his phone, pacing the terrace of our private villa, speaking in hushed, aggressive tones. When he returned to me, his smile was tight. He talked constantly about a failed investment, a liquidity crunch, and how he needed capital fast to save his latest venture. He had looked at me with such intensity over dinner last night, holding my hand across the table. "I need a miracle, Jeanette," he had said, swirling his wine. "I need access to funds I just don't have right now." I had squeezed his hand, offering him everything I had, which was nothing but my love and support. "We will figure it out," I had promised. "We have each other." He had looked at me then, not with love, but with a strange, calculating assessment, a look I did not understand until this very moment. He was not looking for comfort. He was appraising my value. The screech of metal against metal tore me from my memories. The sound was deafening, vibrating through the floor and into my bones. The heavy doors of the container groaned and swung open, allowing a blinding rectangle of white light to slice through the darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears streaming down my face from the sudden brightness. "Wakey, wakey, sleeping beauty." The voice was familiar, but the tone was wrong. It lacked the warmth, the playful cadence I had fallen in love with. I blinked rapidly, my eyes adjusting to the glare. 3 silhouettes stood framed against the harsh sunlight. As my vision cleared, the figures sharpened. 2 were men I did not know. Burly figures clad in tactical gear, holding assault rifles with a casual familiarity that chilled my blood. And in the center stood Lance. He looked impeccable, as always. He wore a crisp white linen shirt and beige trousers, his sunglasses reflecting the scene before him, but his posture was different. He was not the doting fiancé anymore. He stood with a slouch of arrogance, a cigarette dangling loosely from his lips. "Lance," I screamed, my voice cracking from dehydration. "Lance, help me. These men, they tied me up. What is happening?" Lance did not rush to me. He did not look horrified. He simply took a drag of his cigarette and exhaled a plume of smoke into the humid air. He turned to one of the armed men. "She is awake. That costs extra, doesn't it?" Dealing with the noise, the mercenary grunted, stepping forward to grab my arm and haul me to my feet. I stumbled, my legs numb, but he dragged me out of the container onto a concrete loading dock. We were outside, but this was not a resort. It looked like an abandoned industrial yard, surrounded by dry scrub and rusted machinery. "Lance, please," I sobbed, the reality of his indifference hitting me harder than the rough handling of the guard. "Tell them to let me go. Why are you just standing there?" Lance finally looked at me. He took off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were devoid of any soul. There was no pity there, only annoyance. "Stop screaming. Jeanette, it is embarrassing," he said, his voice flat. He turned his attention to a third man who had emerged from a black SUV parked nearby. This man was older, dressed in a sharp suit, holding a briefcase. "Papers are ready," the man said, his accent thick and unplaceable. "Transfer is confirmed. 2 million, as agreed, minus the fee for the expedited passport." Lance nodded. Taking the briefcase the man offered, he placed it on the hood of the car and popped the latches. I watched in horror as he flipped through stacks of $100 bills. He was counting. He was counting money while I stood bound and terrified 5 feet away. "It is all there," Lance muttered, a grin spreading across his face, the same grin he used when he closed a deal on a new software package. He snapped the case shut and tucked a new blue passport into his breast pocket. "A pleasure doing business. You sold me—" The words left my mouth as a whisper, then erupted as a scream. "You sold me? Lance, I am your fiancé. We are getting married in 3 months." Lance laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. He walked over to me, invading my personal space. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear, a gesture so intimate, yet so violated in this context that it made my skin crawl. "Jeanette, honey," he said softly, "there is no wedding. There never was. You were a job, a long-term play." I stared at him, my mind unable to process the magnitude of the lie. "What? I am a con artist." "Jeanette," he stated, as casually as if he were telling me his coffee order, "I target women with high net worth potential. When I met you in Seattle, I did my research. Your last name is Norcross. I found records of a Norcross estate, a massive trust fund linked to a deceased industrialist father. I spent 2 years, 2 long, boring years, playing the perfect boyfriend, waiting for you to grant me access to that trust fund." He sighed, looking genuinely aggrieved by his own wasted time. "Imagine my disappointment when I finally hacked your accounts and found out you were telling the truth. You really are just a poor, nobody orphan, no trust fund, no secret millions, just a salary and a studio apartment. You loved me," I stammered, the betrayal cutting deeper than any knife. "I loved the potential of you," he corrected coldly, "but you turned out to be a bad investment, and in my line of work, when an asset doesn't yield a return, you liquidate it. I have debts. Jeanette, serious debts to people who break legs first and ask questions later. Selling you to the network covers my losses and buys me a new identity in Brazil." He turned his back on me, signaling to the mercenaries, "Load her up. The buyer is waiting at the Cliff House." "Lance, no. You cannot do this," I screamed, struggling against the guard's iron grip. "I am a human being. You cannot just sell me." Lance paused at the door of the SUV. He looked back over his shoulder, his expression bored. "I just did. Goodbye, Jeanette." He got into the car and drove away. leaving me in the dust, choking on his exhaust and my own shattered heart. The mercenaries wasted no time. They shoved me into the back of a windowless van. The drive was a nightmare of sharp turns and bumps, lasting perhaps an hour. I sat in the darkness, the tears drying on my face, replaced by a cold, hard knot of terror in my stomach. I was not a person anymore. I was merchandise. I had been sold like a piece of furniture to cover a gambling debt. When the van finally stopped, the doors opened to the sound of crashing waves. I was hauled out, my legs barely supporting my weight. We were at the edge of the world, a massive modernist mansion perched precariously on a jagged cliff overlooking the churning Pacific Ocean. The architecture was cold and imposing, concrete and glass staring out at the water like a fortress. There were no other houses around, no road signs, no civilization. We were miles from help, in a lawless pocket of the Mexican coast where money was the only authority. The guards pushed me toward the heavy oak doors of the entrance. I stumbled, my torn cocktail dress, the one I had worn for our romantic dinner, fluttering in the stiff ocean breeze. I felt naked, exposed, and utterly alone. I had nothing. My phone was gone. My wallet was gone. My identity was being erased with every step I took toward that house. Lance had taken everything. Well, almost everything. As I was shoved through the doorway into the cool, air-conditioned interior of the mansion, I felt the cold metal of my pendant resting against my collarbone. I looked down. It was a silver necklace, old and tarnished, holding a strange, swirling charm. My mother had called it the storm's eye. It was the only thing she had left me when she died, the only link I had to a past I barely knew. "Keep it hidden, Jeanette," she had told me once, her voice serious in a way that scared me as a child. "And never take it off." I clutched the pendant with my bound hands, feeling its ridges against my palms. It was just a piece of jewelry. It could not save me. It could not undo the betrayal or bring back the man I thought I loved. But as the heavy doors slammed shut behind me, sealing me inside this prison of luxury, it was the only piece of myself I had left to hold on to. The guard prodded me in the back with the muzzle of his rifle. "Move. The architect wants to see the merchandise." I took a breath, the air tasting of expensive cologne and fear, and walked forward into the belly of the beast. The room I was shoved into was not a dungeon, nor was it a torture chamber. Yet it terrified me far more than the dark shipping container ever could. It was a cathedral of glass and steel, a living room so expansive and coldly beautiful that it felt like a mausoleum for the living. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the jagged cliffs and the violent, churning sea below. But inside, the air was still and frigid, scented with leather and ozone. The furniture was sparse, sharp-angled, and likely cost more than the entire neighborhood I grew up in. It was a place where humanity went to die, replaced by aesthetics and power. My knees hit the polished marble floor hard as the guard forced me down. The pain was a sharp, grounding jolt that kept me from fainting. I gasped, trying to pull air into my constricted lungs, my hands still bound tightly behind my back. "Stand her up," a voice commanded. It was not the rough growl of the mercenaries, nor was it Lance's deceitful tenor. This voice was like crushed velvet wrapped around a razor blade smooth, cultured, and undeniably lethal. The guard hauled me to my feet. I swayed, blinking against the stark white recessed lighting, and finally focused on the man sitting in the high-backed leather armchair across from me. He was known in the underworld whispers as the Butcher. But as I looked at him, I realized the rumors were wrong. A butcher is messy. A butcher is bloody. This man was surgical. He was immaculate. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit that fit his lean frame perfectly, and his silver hair was combed back with severe precision. He did not look like a thug. He looked like a CEO, or perhaps a head of state. This was Silas Vane, the man they called the Architect, and looking into his pale, watercolored eyes, I knew that being sold to a butcher would have been a mercy. A butcher just kills you. An architect deconstructs you, piece by piece, to see how you are made. To my sickening surprise, Lance was there too. He was standing near the fireplace, holding a crystal tumbler of amber liquid, looking out of place despite his expensive suit. He looked sweaty, his earlier arrogance replaced by a jittery, sycophantic energy. He was a small dog trying to play in a wolf's den, and he knew it. Seeing him there, safe and drinking expensive scotch while I stood bound and bleeding, ignited a fury in me that burned hotter than my fear. "She looks a bit damaged," Silas noted, his voice devoid of emotion. He did not rise from his chair. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, resting his weight on a polished black cane with a silver handle shaped like a cobra's head. "I was promised pristine merchandise. Mr. Sterling, this one looks like she has been dragged through a landfill," Lance laughed nervously, the sound bouncing awkwardly off the hard surfaces of the room. "Just a bit of travel wear and tear. Mr. Vane, the flight was rough, and the container was not exactly first class. But underneath the dust, she is perfect, educated, healthy, no family connections to come looking for her. A ghost, just as you requested." Silas hummed, a sound that vibrated in his chest. He stood up slowly, his movements fluid and deliberate. He walked toward me, the tap-tap-tap of his cane on the marble echoing like a countdown. I wanted to scream, to spit in his face, to beg, but my throat was parched and paralyzed. I could only stare at him as he loomed over me. He did not touch me with his hands. That would have been too personal. Instead, he reached out with his cane, the cold metal of the cobra's head pressed under my chin. Forcing my head up, I shuddered, tears pricking my eyes. But I refused to look away. I glared at him, pouring every ounce of my hatred into my gaze. "Fire," Silas murmured, tilting his head. "I like that. Most of them just cry. This one has spirit. It makes the breaking process so much more entertaining." He removed the cane and turned to Lance. "She is thin. Are you sure she is healthy?" "Strong as an ox," Lance lied, stepping forward eagerly. "She runs marathons, does yoga. You are getting top-tier genetics here. Silas, worth every penny of the 2 million. "We shall see," Silas said dismissively. He snapped his fingers, and a heavy-set guard stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. "Check her. I want to ensure there are no hidden scars or marks. I do not pay full price for damaged goods." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "No," I whispered. "Do not touch me." Lance rolled his eyes, checking his watch. "Come on, Silas. Is this really necessary? I have a plane to catch. The wire transfer is pending your final authorization. Just sign off on it so we can all move on." "I move when I am ready. Mr. Sterling," Silas said, his voice dropping an octave. The threat was clear enough that Lance shut his mouth instantly and took a step back. The guard approached me. He smelled of tobacco and stale sweat. His large, calloused hands reached out for the neckline of my torn dress. "No!" I screamed, twisting my body away. "Get away from me!" "Hold her still," Silas commanded. Bored, the guard grabbed my shoulder with one hand, his grip like a vice, and with the other, he grabbed the fabric of my dress. I thrashed, kicking out with my legs, fighting with the desperation of a cornered animal. I was not going to let them strip me. I was not going to let them take my dignity along with my freedom. "Get off me!" I shrieked. In the chaotic struggle, the guard yanked hard. The delicate fabric of my dress tore with a sickening rip. But as the fabric gave way, something else was pulled free. My silver necklace, which I had kept tucked beneath my clothes for safety, was snagged by the guard's rough movements. The clasp held, but the chain snapped taut against my neck before the pendant popped out. Swinging wildly in the open air, it swung back and forth like a pendulum, a simple, heavy platinum disc, tarnished by time and wear. In the center sat a rare, black sapphire, cut in a way that it seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Surrounding the stone was an intricate engraving of a swirling storm cloud with a single, piercing eye in the center, the storm's eye. "Enough!" Silas barked, raising his cane to strike the guard for his clumsiness. But then he froze. The silence that descended on the room was instantaneous and absolute, It was not just quiet, it was the sudden, vacuum-like silence of a bomb about to detonate. Silas Vane, the man who terrified cartels, the man whose face had been a mask of stone, was staring at my chest. His eyes were wide, the pupils contracted to pinpoints. The cane in his hand began to shake. It started as a subtle tremor and quickly escalated until the tip was rattling against the marble floor. He did not look at my face. He did not look at my exposed skin or the tear in my dress. His gaze was locked, magnetized, to the pendant swinging gently against my collarbone. Lance, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, stepped forward, annoyed. "Hey, watch the merchandise. You rip the dress. You buy the dress. Silas, that is—" "Silence," Silas whispered. It was barely a sound, but it carried such intensity that Lance froze mid-sentence. Silas took a step back, then another. The blood had drained from his face so completely that he looked like a wax figure. He looked terrified. "Where?" Silas's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again, his voice trembling. "Where did you get that?" I pressed my back against the wall, confused by his reaction. "What?" "The pendant," he rasped, pointing a shaking finger at the storm's eye. "That crest. Where did you get it?" "It is mine," I said defiantly, though my voice shook. "It was my mother's." Silas let out a breath that sounded like a dying rattle. "Your mother." He looked up then, meeting my eyes for the first time since he had seen the necklace, but the predatory look was gone. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated horror. He was searching my face, scanning my features with a desperate intensity, looking for something he was afraid to find. "Your mother," he repeated, the words stumbling out of his mouth. "Tell me her name. Tell me her name right now." "Why do you care?" I spat back. "Tell me!" Silas roared, the sound echoing off the glass walls, making Lance jump, but there was no anger in the shout, only panic. "Serafina," I shouted back, flinching. Her name was Serafina Norcross. The name hung in the air. For a second, nobody moved. Then, the impossible happened. Silas Vane, the architect, the untouchable crime lord, dropped his cane. It clattered loudly on the floor, rolling away. He did not seem to notice. His legs seemed to give out beneath him, and he fell heavily to his knees. The guard who had been holding me released his grip and backed away, looking at his boss with utter confusion. Lance stood with his mouth open, his glass of scotch tilting dangerously in his hand. "Serafina," Silas whispered, his voice broken. He stared at the floor, his hands trembling as he placed them on his thighs. "Serafina Norcross." He looked up at me again. This time, there was no assessment in his eyes. There was only reverence and a deep, crushing fear. "You said she was a librarian," he asked, his voice pleading, as if hoping I would change my story. "Yes," I said, bewildered. "She was a librarian. She lived in Maine. She died 4 years ago. She was nobody." Silas let out a hysterical, breathless laugh. "Nobody. She was nobody." Tears, actual tears, began to pool in his eyes. He looked at the pendant again, then at me. "That is the storm's eye, the command seal, and the black sapphire that is the mark of the direct bloodline." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "You are not just a random girl. You are the daughter of the Viper." "I do not know what you are talking about," I stammered. "My mother was a gentle woman. She grew hydrangeas." "She grew empires," Silas whispered. Then, he did something that made my world tilt on its axis. He lowered his head until his forehead touched the cold marble floor. He prostrated himself before me, a position of total submission. "Mr. Vane," Lance asked, his voice high and squeaky, "what are you doing? Is this some kind of ritual? Look, about the money?" "Shut up," Silas screamed into the floor, not lifting his head. "One more word, and I will have your tongue cut out." He took a deep, shuddering breath and spoke to the ground, his voice thick with emotion. "Young mistress," he said, the title sounding alien and heavy. "I did not know. I swear on my life. I did not know. If I had known who you truly were, I would have stopped myself at any cost from signing those transfer papers." I stood there, frozen, my thoughts unable to connect. The terrified man collapsed on the floor with the ruthless figure who had threatened me only moments earlier. "Who are you?" I whispered, "and who did you believe my mother was?" Silas slowly raised his head, his eyes bloodshot. "Your mother was no librarian. Miss Norcross, Seraphina Norcross, was the shadow, the veil. She was the woman who shaped the rules of the world we live in." He gestured vaguely toward the mansion. "The guards, the wealth surrounding us, all of this exists only because she permitted it to." His gaze fell on the pendant at my neck, as though it were a sacred object that might harm him if he came too close. "I am finished," he murmured. "I treated the daughter of Seraphina Norcross as if she were nothing more than property. The Shadow Clan will make me pay dearly for it." He looked at me, desperation carved into every line of his face. "Please, you have to believe me. I am loyal to the Veil. I have always been loyal. This is a mistake, a terrible, fatal mistake." Lance stepped forward, looking from Silas to me, his face twisting in confusion and irritation. "Okay, this is getting weird. Shadow Clan Veil Silas. Have you lost your mind? She is a secretary from Seattle. Her biggest accomplishment is organizing the office Christmas party. Just pay me my money so I can leave." Silas slowly rose from his knees, but as he stood, the fear in his posture evaporated, replaced by a cold, murderous rage directed entirely at the man standing by the fireplace. He did not pick up his cane. He did not need it. "You," Silas said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "You brought her here. You sold her." "Yeah, I sold her," Lance snapped, losing his patience. "That was the deal." "What is wrong with you?" Silas looked at me one last time, a strange mix of apology and duty in his eyes. "Miss Norcross," he said softly, "allow me to correct this error." The atmosphere in the room shifted violently. The air grew heavy with the promise of violence, and for the first time since I woke up in that container, I realized that the danger was no longer directed at me. The monster in the room had found a new target, and looking at Lance's confused, arrogant face, I knew he had no idea that the ground beneath his feet had just turned into a grave. Lance laughed, a brittle, jagged sound that scraped against the high ceilings of the glass room. He still did not understand. He was a man standing on the train tracks, staring at the oncoming light and convinced it was just a sunrise. To him, the sudden prostration of a crime lord was an elaborate joke, a piece of theater designed to negotiate a lower price. He adjusted his suit jacket, forcing a smile that looked more like a rictus of panic, and took a step toward the man who was currently kneeling on the marble floor. "Mr. Vane, come on," Lance said, his voice wobbling with false bravado. "You are a funny guy. I get it. The whole dramatic flair thing. It is very cinematic." He reached out, his hand hovering over Silas's shoulder in a gesture of familiar camaraderie that made my stomach turn. Lance had always been like this, assuming he could charm his way into spaces where he did not belong. "But seriously," Lance continued, his fingers brushing against the fabric of Silas's suit, "the girl is just—" The sound that followed was not loud, but it was sickeningly precise. It was the wet, sharp crack of a dry branch snapping under a heavy boot. Silas moved with a speed that defied physics. One moment he was on his knees, head bowed in submission. The next, he was standing, his hand clamped around Lance's extended index finger. He did not even look at Lance. He did not grimace or strain. He simply applied pressure, twisting the digit back until it met the back of Lance's hand. Lance stared at his hand for a fraction of a second, his brain refusing to process the angle of his own finger. Then, the pain arrived. His scream tore through the room, a high-pitched, primal shriek that shattered the oppressive silence. He fell to his knees, clutching his hand to his chest, his face draining of all color. "My hand! You broke my hand! You crazy psychopath!" Lance wailed, tears instantly springing to his eyes. Silas wiped his hand on a silk handkerchief he produced from his pocket, looking at Lance with the same dispassionate disgust one might show a cockroach that had scurried across a dinner plate. "I did not break your hand, Mr. Sterling," Silas said, his voice calm and terrifyingly level. "I merely adjusted your perspective. You do not touch me, and you certainly do not speak of her in that tone." He turned away from the sobbing man and snapped his fingers at the guards who were standing by the door, frozen in confusion. "Code Black," Silas commanded. The authority in his voice was absolute. "Lock down the entire compound. Jam all outgoing signals. If a single byte of data leaves this mountain, I will execute every one of you." The guards snapped to attention, fear overriding their confusion. "And get the secure line," Silas continued, his eyes darting nervously to me. "Inform the mistress. Tell her we have found the heart. Tell her the search is over." "What about him?" one of the guards asked, gesturing to Lance, who was curled in a fetal position on the floor, cradling his broken finger. Silas looked at Lance, his lip curling. "Secure him. Do not kill him. Not yet. If he dies before the debt is settled, I will hold you personally responsible." 2 guards rushed forward, grabbing Lance by the arms. He screamed again as they hauled him up, his legs dragging uselessly behind him. But Silas was already moving toward me. He did not grab me. He did not push me. He stopped 3 feet away and bowed his head slightly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Please, allow me," he said softly. He pulled a small knife from his belt. I flinched, shrinking back against the wall. But he moved with careful slowness, stepping behind me to slice through the plastic zip ties binding my wrists. The plastic gave way, and my arms fell to my sides, pins and needles rushing into my numb fingers. "I am so sorry," he murmured. "I am so incredibly sorry." He gestured toward the large velvet armchair where he had been sitting moments before. It was the seat of power in this room, the throne from which he had judged me. "Please, sit. You must be exhausted." I walked to the chair on trembling legs and collapsed into it. The velvet was soft against my skin, a stark contrast to the cold metal of the container floor. Silas moved to a side table, his hands shaking visibly as he poured water from a crystal carafe into a glass. He brought it to me, holding it with both hands as if offering an oblation to a deity. I took the glass, the cool water soothing my parched throat. But my mind was racing. "You called my mother the shadow," I said, my voice hoarse. "You said she ran the veil. What is that? My mother was a woman who clipped coupons and worried about the heating bill. She was not this." Silas remained standing, refusing to sit in my presence. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and awe. "That was her greatest masterpiece." Then, he said quietly, "The veil is not a myth, Miss Norcross. It is the invisible current that runs beneath the world. Governments, corporations, armies, they all have secrets, and the veil knows them all. They trade in information, in leverage, and when necessary, in force. Your mother, Serafina, sat at the center of the web. She was the broker of peace and the architect of wars." He paused, looking at the storm's eye pendant that still hung around my neck. "I am just a regional contractor," he confessed, wiping sweat from his brow. "I handle logistics, weapons, transport. I thought I was a king in this territory, but compared to your mother, I am an insect. If she knew I had even looked at you the wrong way, she would burn this entire coastline to ash." I stared at the water in my glass, the ripples reflecting the turmoil in my mind. My mother, the woman who taught me how to bake cookies and knitted me ugly sweaters. She was a warlord, a spy master. It seemed impossible. And yet, looking at the terror in the eyes of this dangerous man, it was the only explanation that made sense. "If she is so powerful," I whispered, "why did she leave me alone? Why did she let Lance?" I choked on the name. Silas's expression hardened. That is a question only she can answer. But rest assured, the veil protects its own. Usually, he turned his head toward the guards holding Lance. Bring him here. They dragged Lance into the center of the room and threw him down on the Persian rug. He was a mess. His nose was bleeding, his suit was torn, and his hand was swelling rapidly. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. He saw me sitting on the throne, holding the crystal glass, with the terrifying architect standing behind me like a loyal butler. The dynamic had shifted so violently that Lance seemed to be suffering from vertigo. "Jeanette," he croaked. "Jeanette, baby, please, tell them. Tell them who I am. Tell them we are in love." I looked at him, really looked at him. For 3 years, I had seen a prince. Now, I saw a rat, a desperate, scrambling rat caught in a trap of his own making. "In love?" I asked, my voice flat. "You sold me for $2 million, Lance. You put me in a box." "I had to," he pleaded, crawling forward on his knees. "I was in debt. They were going to kill me. Jeanette, I did it for us. I was going to come back for you. I swear. Once I had the money, I was going to buy you back." "Liar," Silas spat. He walked over to a display case on the wall and removed a pistol. It was a Desert Eagle, heavy and gold-plated, a weapon designed for show as much as for killing. He checked the chamber and walked back to me, presenting the gun handle first. "Miss Norcross," Silas said formally, "in our world, justice is not delegated, it is taken. This man has insulted your bloodline. He has trafficked your person. He is trash." He placed the heavy, cold steel into my hand. "The safety is off," Silas whispered. "He is yours. Do with him what you will." The gun was heavier than I expected. It dragged my hand down, resting on the velvet arm of the chair. I stared at it. The gold glinted under the lights. I had never held a gun before. It felt alien, yet strangely empowering. I lifted the weapon. My hand shook, the barrel wavering in the air. I pointed it at Lance. Lance stopped breathing. He stared down the barrel, his eyes bulging. "Jeanette, no," he whimpered, not running down his face. "Please, remember Paris. Remember the Eiffel Tower. I love you. I really do. Do not do this. You are not a killer. You are my sweet Jeanette." I looked at him, and memories flooded back. Not the Eiffel Tower, not the romantic dinners. I remembered the container. I remembered the darkness. I remembered him counting the money while I screamed. I remembered him tucking the hair behind my ear and telling me I was a bad investment. A coldness spread through my chest, freezing the tears that wanted to fall. He was right. I was not a killer. Not yesterday. But yesterday, I was a girl who thought the world was kind. Today, I was the daughter of the shadow. I tightened my grip on the handle. My finger hovered over the trigger. I could end him. Right now. One squeeze, and the nightmare would be over. The rage inside me roared, demanding blood. He deserved to die. He deserved worse than death. But then, a thought struck me. Death was final. Death was silence. Death was peace. Lance did not deserve peace. I lowered the gun. The room was silent. Lance let out a long, shuddering breath, a sob of relief breaking from his throat. "Oh, thank God. Thank God. Jeanette, thank you. I knew you could not do it. I knew you still loved me." I stood up, the gun hanging loosely by my side. I looked at Silas. "You have a network, right?" I asked. "You move things, people?" "I do," Silas replied, watching me closely. "And Lance?" I said, gesturing to the man on the floor with the barrel of the gun. "He told me he was planning to sell me to a diamond mine, somewhere in Africa, where the labor is hard and life is cheap." Lance's face went rigid. "Jeanette, he said they need workers who disappear." I continued, my voice gaining strength. "He said it was a one-way ticket." I turned to Lance, meeting his gaze with eyes that felt as old as the ocean outside. "You wanted to liquidate an asset. Lance, you wanted to trade a life for profit. I think that is a brilliant business model." I tossed the gold pistol back to Silas. He caught it deftly. "Do not kill him," I commanded. The words felt natural on my tongue. "Death is too easy. It is too quick. He wants to be a commodity. Make him one," I pointed at Lance, who was now shaking his head frantically. "Send him to the mines," I said coldly. "The exact ones he intended for me. Let him dig in the dirt. Let him rot in the dark. Let him work until his hands bleed and his back breaks. And let him think about me every single day for the rest of his miserable life." "No," Lance screamed, scrambling backward. "No. Jeanette, kill me. Just shoot me. Please do not send me there." Silas looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was not a nice smile, but it was one of deep, genuine respect. He bowed low, lower than before. "Merciful cruelty," Silas murmured. "To grant life, but take away living, you are truly the daughter of Seraphina." He snapped his fingers. "Get him out of my sight. Crate him up. Shipping manifest for Sierra Leone leaves in 4 hours." "Jeanette!" Lance shrieked as the guards grabbed him. He fought them, kicking and biting, losing all dignity. "Jeanette, you cannot do this. We are engaged. I love you. No." His screams echoed down the hallway as they dragged him out, fading into the distance until the heavy doors slammed shut, silencing him. I stood there, my heart pounding against my ribs, feeling a strange hollowness where my fear used to be. I had sentenced a man to a living hell, and I did not feel guilty. I felt clean. A low thrumming sound began to vibrate through the floor, growing louder and louder until the glass windows rattled in their frames. I looked out. Rising from below the cliff edge, a sleek black helicopter ascended into view. It was military grade, menacing and beautiful against the blue sky. On the side of the fuselage, painted in dark gray, was a symbol I knew well, a swirling storm cloud, the storm's eye. "Your chariot has arrived, mistress," Silas said, gesturing to the terrace doors. "The veil has come to take you home." I looked at the helicopter, then back at the empty spot on the rug where Lance had been begging moments ago. I touched the pendant at my throat. Jeanette, the office worker, had died in that shipping container. The woman who walked toward the terrace doors was someone else entirely, and she was ready to meet her mother. The helicopter ride was a blur of noise and vibration, a transition between two worlds that felt less like travel and more like a dimensional shift. I watched the jagged coastline of Mexico fade into the deep blue of the Gulf, eventually replaced by the sprawling flat patchwork of the American South. We flew for hours, refueling once midair from a tanker plane that appeared out of the clouds like a ghost, a maneuver that terrified me but seemed routine to the pilots. When we finally descended, the landscape below was aggressively mundane. It was Texas. I recognized the dry earth, the vast horizons, and the distinctive vegetation. We were not heading toward a city or a military base. We were landing in the middle of a dairy farm. I looked down at the herds of black and white cows grazing lazily in the afternoon sun. A red barn, a silo, and a dusty farmhouse sat peacefully in the center of the property. A sign painted on the roof of the barn read, "Bluebonnet Dairy," in cheerful white letters. It looked like the cover of a country lifestyle magazine. "We are here," the pilot announced over the headset. "Here?" I asked, confused. "It is a farm." "Watch," was the only reply. As the helicopter hovered over a large concrete patch near the silo, the ground began to move. The earth split open. A massive section of the pasture, complete with fake grass and dirt, slid aside on hydraulic rails to reveal a gaping, illuminated maw leading deep underground. We descended into the earth, and the false pasture closed above us, sealing out the sun and the cows and the normal world. This was the Citadel. The hangar we landed in was larger than a football field, carved out of solid rock and lined with polished steel. Mechanics swarmed the aircraft the moment the skids touched the floor. I was ushered out by a team of agents who moved with the same fluid lethality as Silas Vane, though none of them spoke a word. They guided me through a maze of corridors, past glass-walled laboratories where people in hazmat suits handled glowing vials, and armories stocked with weapons that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. We stopped in front of a set of double doors made of frosted glass. The agent nodded to me, scanned his retina, and the doors slid open. The room beyond was a nerve center. It was circular, dominated by a massive wraparound screen that displayed a dizzying array of data satellite feeds. Stock market fluctuations, thermal maps of conflict zones, and encrypted communication streams. In the center of this chaos stood a woman. She was facing the screens, her back to me. She wore a tailored white suit that seemed to glow in the dim light of the command center. Her posture was erect, commanding, radiating a power that felt tangible in the air. She was speaking into a headset, her voice calm but cutting. Reroute the drone strike to the secondary coordinates. I want the supply line cut, not the village, and tell the Prime Minister that if he does not sign the treaty by midnight, the photos of his offshore accounts go public at 12:01. Execute. She tapped the headset, ending the call, and the screens shifted, showing a bridge collapsing in a silent cloud of dust somewhere in Eastern Europe. "Mother?" I whispered. The word felt small in this room of global consequences. The woman froze, her shoulders tensed. Slowly, she turned around. It had been 4 years since I had seen her, in my memory. Serafina Norcross was a soft woman who wore cardigans and smelled of vanilla and old books. She had tired eyes and a gentle smile. The woman standing before me was a Titan. Her hair, once gray and pulled into a messy bun, was now a sleek, silver bob that framed a face sharp with intelligence and devoid of wrinkles. She did not look 60. She looked ageless, but when her eyes locked onto mine, the Titan crumbled. "Jeanette," she breathed. She crossed the distance between us in seconds, not walking but rushing, her composure shattering with every step. She grabbed me, pulling me into an embrace so tight it knocked the wind out of me. I felt her trembling. I felt moisture on my neck. My mother, the woman I had never seen shed a tear when my father died, or when she broke her leg falling down the stairs, was weeping. "I have you," she sobbed into my hair. "I have you. You are safe. Oh, my baby girl. I am so sorry." I stood there, stiff at first, overwhelmed by the sensory overload of the last 24 hours, but the smell of her beneath the expensive perfume, there was still that faint trace of vanilla broke through my shock. I hugged her back, burying my face in the crisp white fabric of her suit. "You are alive," I said, my voice muffled. "You are really alive." "I am," she said, pulling back to cup my face in her hands. Her thumbs wiped away the grime on my cheeks. "And so are you. That is all that matters." She led me to a seating area in the corner of the room, away from the prying eyes of the analysts working at the consoles. She poured me tea from a silver service Earl Grey, my favorite, prepared exactly how I liked it with a splash of milk and honey. It was a bizarre touch of domesticity in the middle of a war room. "I have so many questions," I said, holding the warm cup with both hands to stop them from shaking. "I know," Serafina said, sitting opposite me, her eyes never leaving my face. "And you deserve every answer. Silas, the man who bought me, he said you run the veil. He said, 'You are the shadow,'" Serafina nodded slowly. "Silas Vane is a useful tool, but he lacks imagination. Yes, I run the veil. We are not just an intelligence agency, Jeanette. We are the immune system of the underworld. We keep the balance. When a dictator gets too greedy, we trip him up. When a cartel gets too violent, we prune them. We operate in the shadows so the light can stay on for everyone else." "You told me you were a librarian," I said, feeling a flash of anger. "You told me Dad was an insurance salesman." "Your father was a logistics genius who moved assets for the CIA before he joined me," she corrected gently. "And I did work in a library once, for 6 months. It was my cover in Berlin during the Cold War." She reached out and took my hand. "Jeanette, I created that life for you, the boring suburbs, the public school. The mundane job because I wanted to protect you. In my world, family is a weakness. It is a target. If my enemies knew I had a daughter, they would have come for you the day you were born. I had to hide you in plain sight. I had to make you so aggressively normal that no one would look twice. I pulled my hand away. So my whole life was a lie. Everything I achieved, was any of it real? Serafina sighed. A sound that carried the weight of 1,000 difficult decisions. You are smart, Jeanette. You are talented. But I did clear the path. Do you remember when you were 10, and that girl, Becky, was bullying you relentlessly? And then suddenly, her father got transferred to a branch in Alaska. My eyes widened. You did that? He received a very lucrative job offer that required immediate relocation, she said with a shrug. And your scholarship to Stanford, you earned the grades, darling. Truly you did. But the admissions board had a little nudge to ensure your application was at the top of the pile. I wanted you to have the best, without the danger that comes with my name. I sat back, stunned. My life felt like a dollhouse that she had been rearranging from the outside. And Lance? I asked, the name tasting like bile. Was he part of the plan too? Did you arrange for a con artist to date me for 3 years? Serafina's face darkened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. No, she said, her voice turning to ice. Lance was my failure. She stood up and walked to the glass wall, looking out at the hive of activity below. I have an artificial intelligence system, a surveillance grid called the Argus. It monitors everyone who comes within a 10-mile radius of you. It runs background checks, financial audits, psychological profiles. It is supposed to flag anyone with malicious intent before they can even buy you a drink. She turned back to me, her expression grim. Lance Sterling, or whatever his real name is, should have triggered 1,000 red flags. He had debts, criminal connections, a history of fraud. The Argus should have alerted my security team the moment he matched with you on that dating app. I would have had him neutralized before the first date. So why didn't it? I asked. Because someone turned it off, Serafina said. The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Someone with high-level clearance went into the system and whitelisted Lance. They blinded the Argus specifically for him. They wanted him to get close to you. They wanted him to drain your accounts, to make you desperate, and ultimately, to sell you. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Why sell me if they wanted to hurt you? Why not just kidnap me? Because kidnapping requires ransom, Serafina explained. It opens a negotiation, selling you into the sex trade or a labor camp that is designed to make you disappear. To erase you, it was a message. Jeanette, someone wanted to show me that they could touch the one thing I love most, and that I was powerless to stop it. She walked back to me and knelt by my chair, bringing her face level with mine. I have been fighting a shadow war for 40 years, she said softly. I have made enemies, but this is internal. Only someone inside the veil could have manipulated the Argus. I have a traitor in my court, and until I find them, you are not safe. She reached into the pocket of her white jacket and pulled out a sleek black tablet. She placed it on the table between us. I have prepared an exit strategy for you, she said. I looked at the tablet. It displayed a dossier with a photo of a woman who looked like me, but with different hair, a different nose. This is a new identity, Serafina said. New face, surgical alteration, very subtle but effective. New name, citizenship in Switzerland. There is an account linked to this identity containing $100 million. You can leave tonight. You can go to Geneva, buy a chateau, marry a nice banker, and live a life of absolute luxury and peace. You will never see me again. You will never hear the name Norcross again. You will be free. And if I stay? I asked, my heart pounding. Serafina hesitated. If you stay, you step into the arena. You are my daughter. You are the heir to the veil. If you stay, you become a target for every assassin, every rival clan, and every traitor who wants to see my empire burn. It is a life of constant vigilance. It is a life of violence. She looked at me with pleading eyes. Take the money. Jeanette, go to Switzerland. Be happy. Let me burn down the world to avenge you, but do not be part of the fire. I looked at the photo of the stranger on the tablet, the Swiss heiress. She looked safe. She looked happy. She looked boring. Then I closed my eyes and saw the shipping container. I smelled the oil and the fear. I saw Lance's face as he counted the money. I saw Silas Vane kneeling in terror not because of me, but because of the blood in my veins. I had spent my whole life being safe, being normal. And what had it gotten me? Sold like cattle by the man I slept next to for 3 years. The safety was an illusion. The normal life was a lie. I reached up and touched the Storm's Eye pendant. It felt warm against my skin, pulsing with a strange energy. My mother had built an empire to keep the monsters away, and the monsters had come anyway. Running to Switzerland wouldn't change that. It would just mean I was hiding in a more expensive box. I opened my eyes. I looked at the powerful woman in the white suit, the woman who ruled the world from underground. I saw the fear in her eyes, fear for me. She was strong enough to fight armies, but she was terrified of losing her daughter. I could not leave her to fight the traitor alone, and more importantly, I could not let the person who set Lance on me get away with it. Someone had opened the door for the wolf. I wanted to know who. I pushed the tablet away. I do not want to go to Switzerland, I said, my voice steady. I do not like fondue. Serafina blinked, surprised. Jeanette, listen to me. No, you listen, I interrupted. Standing up, I felt a surge of adrenaline, a clarity I had never experienced before. You spent 24 years hiding me, and in the end, it did not work. They found me. They hurt me. I am done hiding. Mother, I am done being the victim. I looked at the screens, at the map of the world that my mother controlled. You said someone inside the veil did this. Someone close to you. Yes, Serafina whispered. Then you need someone you can trust. I said, someone who is not on the payroll. Someone whose loyalty cannot be bought. I turned to her. I want to stay. I want to learn. I want to know who sold me. And I want to look them in the eye when we take them down. Serafina stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, the fear in her eyes was replaced by something else. Pride, fierce, burning pride. You have your father's stubbornness, she said, a small smile touching her lips, and my temper. I have the Storm's Eye, I said, touching the pendant. Serafina nodded. She stood up and smoothed her jacket. Very well, if you stay, there is no going back. You are not Jeanette Norcross anymore. Jeanette was a civilian. Jeanette is dead. She walked over to a console and typed a command. The screen behind her shifted, displaying a live feed of the training facility deep within the complex. Men and women were sparring, shooting, learning the art of war. If you are to survive in my world, you need to be forged, Serafina said, her voice regaining its command. It will be painful. It will be exhausting. You will hate me before the end. I can handle it, I said, though I had no idea if that was true. I just knew I had to be. We shall see, she said. She turned to one of the agents standing in the shadows. Cancel the flight to Geneva, and tell the training master to prepare the purgatory protocol. She looked back at me, her eyes steel. Welcome to the Vale, daughter. Try not to get killed on your first day. As I stood there, surrounded by the hum of the supercomputers and the weight of my mother's legacy, I realized that Lance was right about one thing. He had sold a lamb, but he had no idea that the lamb would return as a wolf. The hunt for the traitor had begun, and I was no longer the prey. The first week of the Purgatory Protocol was not about learning how to fight. It was about learning how to suffer. My mother called it deconstruction. I called it hell. Every morning began at 4 o'clock with a bucket of ice water and a 5-mile run through the simulated terrains of the Citadel. Carrying a rucksack filled with 40 pounds of rocks, my lungs burned, my shins splintered with stress fractures, and my skin chafed until it bled. I vomited from exertion so many times that the bile became a familiar taste, but I did not quit. Every time my legs gave out, I saw Lance's face counting that money. Every time I wanted to cry, I saw the shipping container. Hate, I discovered, was a far more potent fuel than carbohydrates. Silas Vane was my shadow. The man who had once terrified me with a single glance was now my drill instructor, my sparring partner, and strangely, my guardian. He took his penance seriously. He pushed me to the brink of collapse, but he never let me fall. "Again," Silas barked. Standing over me in the dojo, I was on my back, gasping for air, sweat stinging my eyes. We were practicing Krav Maga, the Israeli military martial art designed for one purpose: survival. There were no rules, no honor, just efficiency. "I cannot," I wheezed. "Your enemy does not care about your fatigue," Silas said, his voice flat. "Lance did not care. The next man will not care. Get up." I groaned and scrambled to my feet. Silas lunged. He did not hold back. He threw a punch aimed directly at my throat. 2 weeks ago, I would have flinched. Today, muscle memory took over. I stepped inside his guard, deflected the strike with my forearm, and drove my palm into his solar plexus. It was a solid hit. Silas stumbled back a step, coughing. A rare smile touched his lips. "Better," he noted, straightening his tie. Even in the gym, he insisted on wearing a waistcoat. "But you hesitated before the strike. Hesitation is death. You must be fluid. You must be water that turns into ice upon impact." Over the next 3 months, the Citadel transformed me. I spent hours at the shooting range, learning to fire everything from a concealed Glock 26 to a high-caliber sniper rifle. I learned to account for windage, for the Coriolis effect, for the erratic beating of my own heart. I learned that a gun is just a tool, heavy and cold, and it only has the power you give it. But the physical transformation was the easy part. The real education happened in the war room with Serafina. My mother did not teach me how to punch. She taught me how to destroy lives without ever lifting a finger. She taught me the economics of the underworld. We sat for hours analyzing financial ledgers of cartels, deciphering the money laundering schemes of corrupt politicians, and mapping the invisible trade routes of the black market. "Violence is expensive. Jeanette," she told me one evening, pointing to a screen showing a gang war in Brazil. "It attracts attention. It disrupts supply chains. A true queen does not rule with a sword. She rules with leverage. You find what a man wants, or what he fears, and you own him." She taught me criminal psychology. We dissected the profiles of sociopaths, narcissists, and psychopaths. I realized with a sick jolt that Lance fit the profile of a dark triad personality perfectly. My mother taught me how to spot the micro-expressions of a liar, how to manipulate a negotiation by controlling the silence, and how to weaponize my own vulnerability. By the 5th month, the girl from Seattle was gone. I looked in the mirror and did not recognize the reflection. My long, wavy hair, which I used to curl for hours before dates with Lance, was gone. I had cut it into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that exposed the nape of my neck. It was severe. It was practical. My body was lean, corded with muscle rather than soft curves. But the biggest change was in the eyes. The naivety was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating stillness. "You need a name," Silas said one afternoon as I was stripping down a rifle blindfolded. "Jeanette Norcross is a civilian. She is a liability. You need a call sign." I slammed the bolt carrier group back into place and ripped off the blindfold. "Phoenix," I said. Silas raised an eyebrow. "A bit cliché. Isn't it rising from the ashes?" "It is not about the ashes," I said, checking the chamber. "It is about the fire that burned everything I was, and left only this. Phoenix it is, Silas agreed. Between training sessions, I obsessed over the data. I had access to the Vale's archives now, and I spent my nights hunting ghosts. I tracked every digital footprint Lance had left behind. It was a tedious process, sifting through shell companies and encrypted servers. But I found it. Lance had received his payment for selling me, but there was another set of transactions. 6 months before he even proposed to me, Lance had received a series of deposits from a bank in the Cayman Islands. The account was nameless, just a string of numbers. But the routing protocols were sophisticated, too sophisticated for a standard con artist to arrange. I traced the digital exhaust of those transfers. They bounced through servers in Russia, then Singapore, before vanishing. But I found a metadata tag attached to one of the packets, a single word buried in the code Mockingbird. Project Mockingbird, I whispered to the empty computer lab at 3 a.m. I ran a search in the Vale's classified database. Nothing. The file existed, but it was redacted, blacked out. Level 10 clearance required. Only the Shadow had Level 10 clearance. This was not just about Lance being a greedy opportunist. He was an employee. Someone had hired him specifically to target me, to neutralize the heir before she even knew she was a princess, and that someone called their Operation Mockingbird. I brought my findings to Serafina the next day. We were in her private quarters, a rare moment of quiet. She was drinking tea, but her hand trembled as she lifted the cup. It was a slight movement, a rattle of china against the saucer, but I saw it. I had been trained to see everything. "Mother," I asked, looking at her hand. She quickly set the cup down and hid her hand in her lap. "It is nothing, just fatigue. This war with the Vipera clan is draining." "You are sick," I stated, not asking. "I have heard you coughing at night. You are losing weight." Serafina looked at me, her eyes tired. "I am being poisoned. Jeanette." My blood ran cold. "What?" "It is a slow-acting neurotoxin," she admitted calmly. "Thallium-based, but modified. Someone has been dosing me for months, perhaps a year. It mimics natural decline. By the time I realized it, the damage was done to my nervous system." "Who?" I demanded, standing up. "Who has access to your food, your drink?" "That is the problem," she said. "Only my inner circle, my most trusted advisors. The traitor is sitting at my table. Jeanette, that is why time is short. That is why I pushed you so hard. I am not just training a successor, I am training a survivor." She looked at the file I had brought. "Mockingbird, that is the name of the operation to unseat me. I suspected it, but this proves it. Lance was a pawn in Mockingbird. The goal was to remove you as leverage, or perhaps to use you as a hostage to force my abdication." "We have to find the cure," I said. "My doctors are working on it," she dismissed. "But right now, we need to secure the succession. You need to prove you can lead, not just in the dojo, but in the field." She slid a tablet across the table. "This is your final exam." The target was a gang in Chicago known as the Southside Kings. They were a mid-level organization running guns and drugs, but recently they had acquired a hard drive containing the identities of several Vale operatives. They were trying to auction it off to the highest bidder. "I can send a strike team to wipe them out," Serafina said. "But that is messy. It creates noise. I want you to retrieve the drive, and I want you to bring the Kings under the Vale's umbrella. They have territory we need for distribution." "How many men can I take?" I asked. "One," she replied. "Silas." 2 days later, I walked into a derelict meatpacking plant in Chicago. The air smelled of old blood and rust. It was freezing. I wore a long black trench coat over a tailored suit, my heels clicking on the concrete floor. Silas walked 2 paces behind me, carrying a silver briefcase. We were met by 20 men. They were heavily armed, tattoos covering their necks, looking at us with a mixture of amusement and aggression. In the center sat their leader, a man named Bishop. He was massive, sitting on a crate, cleaning a jagged combat knife. "Well, look at this," Bishop sneered. The veil sends a girl. What, did they run out of men? I am not here to discuss gender politics, Bishop, I said, my voice steady. I am here for the drive. The price is $5 million, Bishop said. And that went up to 6 when you walked in with that attitude. I am not paying you $6 million, I said, stopping 10 feet from him. I am not paying you anything. The men around us chuckled, raising their weapons. The sound of safety catches clicking off echoed in the vast space. Then you are dead, Bishop said, standing up. Am I asked. I did not reach for a weapon. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a phone. Silas, show him. Silas stepped forward and opened the briefcase. It was empty, save for a tablet. He turned the screen toward Bishop. What is this? Bishop asked. That, I explained, is a live feed of your grandmother's nursing home in Florida. Room 302, Mrs. Higgins. She is having lunch right now. Applesauce. She looks happy. Bishop's face went pale. You touch her, and I will kill you. I also have the location of your offshore accounts in Panama, I continued, swiping on my phone, and the GPS coordinates of your stash houses on the west side. And, interestingly, I have a recording of you skimming profits from the cartel you supply. If I send that recording to the Mexicans, they will not just kill you, they will skin you. I took a step forward. The gunmen looked uncertain. They were ready for a shootout, not a corporate hostile takeover. Here's the deal, I said, my voice hard as diamond. You give me the drive. You pledge loyalty to the veil. In exchange, I do not liquidate your grandmother. I do not freeze your accounts, and I do not send that recording to the cartel. Instead, I will double your distribution territory by giving you the north side, which we just cleared out. I paused, letting the offer hang in the cold air. You can be a king, Bishop, I said, or you can be a memory. Choose. Bishop looked at the tablet, then at his men, then at me. He saw the look in my eyes. He was looking for fear, but he found only the abyss. He realized that the woman standing before him was more dangerous than the cartel, more dangerous than the police. He slowly closed his knife. The north side, he asked, his voice grueling. Exclusively. I promised. Bishop reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black hard drive. He tossed it to me. I caught it with one hand. Welcome to the Veil, I said. We walked out of the plant without firing a single shot. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I had walked into the lion's den and walked out with the lion on a leash. As we stepped into the cold Chicago night, Silas opened the car door for me. That was impressive. Phoenix, he said, your mother would be proud. It is not about pride, I said, looking at the hard drive. It is about power. Now let us go home. I have a traitor to catch. I was ready. The training was over. The girl who cried in the container was gone. The Phoenix had risen, and she was hungry for revenge. The steady, rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor was the loudest sound in the Citadel. It was a metronome counting down the seconds of an empire. Serafina Norcross, the shadow, the woman who had moved nations on a chessboard and silenced dictators with a whisper, looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Her skin, usually glowing with vitality, was the color of parchment. Tubes snaked from her arms and nose, pumping antidotes and fluids into a body that was fighting a war on a cellular level. The neurotoxin had done its work efficiently. It had not killed her, not yet, but it had stripped her of her crown. She was in a medically induced coma, her formidable mind trapped behind a wall of silence. I stood behind the glass of the ICU, my hands clasped behind my back to hide the fact that I was digging my nails into my palms. I was not Jeanette anymore. I was Phoenix, and Phoenix did not cry. The wolves are circling, Silas said quietly, stepping up beside me. He looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent managing the chaos that had erupted the moment Serafina fell. They are not wolves, I corrected. turning away from the window. They are snakes. The rumors had spread through the underworld like a contagion. The veil was decapitated. The shadow was fading, and in the vacuum of power, the ancient enemies of my mother were rising. Reports were flooding into the command center. 3 safe houses in Europe had been firebombed. A weapons cache in Singapore had been raided, and at every site, the attackers left a calling card, a graffiti tag of a coiled green viper, the Vipera clan. For decades, they had been the second strongest power, always kept in check by my mother's iron grip. They were led by Marcus Thorne, a man whose brutality was legendary. He was the antithesis of Serafina. Where she used surgical precision, he used a sledgehammer. And now, he smelled blood in the water. "We have lost contact with the station in Berlin," Silas reported, handing me a tablet. "Thorne is moving fast. He is testing our defenses. He wants to see if anyone is steering the ship." I took the tablet, my eyes scanning the casualty reports. "Then we need to show him that the captain is still on the bridge." I walked into the main control room. The hum of conversation died instantly. Dozens of analysts, strategists, and hackers looked up at me. They saw the daughter of the boss. They saw the girl who had been rescued from a container 6 months ago. Doubt hung in the air like smoke. I walked to the central podium, the place where my mother always stood. I placed my hands on the console and leaned forward into the microphone. "Listen to me," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the room. "My mother is indisposed, but the veil does not sleep, and it certainly does not surrender. We are going to lock down every asset. We are going to bleed the Vipera clan for every inch of ground they try to take. And if any of you have a problem taking orders from me, the door is open, but if you walk out, do not expect to ever walk back in." Nobody moved. "Good," I said. "Get back to work." The room exploded into action, but as I watched the screens, a cold knot of paranoia tightened in my stomach. Thorne was attacking from the outside, but he was moving with too much confidence. He knew exactly which safe houses were lightly guarded. He knew the rotation schedules of our security teams, and then there was Lance. I retreated to my mother's private office, a sanctuary of mahogany and leather. I pulled up the file on Lance Sterling again. I had read it 100 times, but something was gnawing at me. How did he do it? Lance was a good con man, but he was not a ghost, yet. He had managed to bypass the Argus system. He had known exactly when to make his move. He knew things about me that I had never told him. I looked at the timeline. Lance had accidentally met me at a coffee shop on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. It was the one day a week I left work early to visit a specific bookstore. I never put that in my calendar. I never posted it on social media. He knew my favorite flowers were hydrangeas before I told him. He knew I was allergic to penicillin. He knew I had a fear of thunderstorms. These were not data points you could hack from a bank account. These were intimate details, domestic details. "Someone gave me to him," I whispered to the empty room. "Someone wrapped me up in a bow." I closed my eyes and visualized the people in my life. The circle was incredibly small. There was Serafina, obviously. There was Silas, the newcomer, and there was Ingrid. Ingrid, my breath hitched. Ingrid was our housekeeper. She was the woman who had bandaged my scraped knees when I fell off my bicycle. She was the one who taught me how to braid my hair. She was the warm, grandmotherly presence who made sure I ate my vegetables and remembered my coat. She had been with my mother for 30 years. She was not staff. She was family. But then I thought about Silas. He was a criminal. He had literally bought me. He was now loyal, or claimed to be. But could it be an act? Was he a double agent working for Thorne, playing the long game to get close to the center of the veil? I had 2 suspects. One broke my heart to consider, the other made logical sense, but logic had failed to protect me before. I needed proof. I needed a trap. I pressed the intercom button on the desk. "Silas, come in here, and bring Ingrid. I need to brief you both on a mission." 5 minutes later, they stood before me. Silas looked alert, his hand resting near his holster. Ingrid looked worried, wringing her hands in her apron. She looked so harmless. A sweet old woman with gray curls and kind eyes. "What is it, dear?" Ingrid asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Is it your mother? Is there a change?" "No," I lied smoothly. "This is about the war. Thorn is gaining ground because he thinks he knows our secrets, but he does not know about the Black Ledger." Silas frowned. "The Black Ledger. I thought that was a myth." "It is real," I said, leaning back in my chair. "It is a physical hard drive containing the true identities of every deep-cover operative in the Western Hemisphere, including the moles we have inside the Vipra clan. If Thorn gets it, he wins. If we secure it, we can destroy him from the inside." I looked at them both. "My mother hid it in a decommissioned bunker in the Nevada desert. Coordinates are in her safe. I am going to retrieve it personally tonight. I cannot trust a courier." "That is too dangerous," Silas argued immediately. "Let me go." "No," I said firmly. "Biometric locks. Only a Norcross can open it. I am leaving at 0200 hours. I will take a stealth jet. I need you. Silas, to prep the aircraft. And Ingrid, I need you to pack a travel bag for me, tactical gear, but also medical supplies just in case." "Of course, darling," Ingrid said, nodding. "I will make sure you have everything you need." "Keep this quiet," I warned. "If Thorn finds out I am leaving the Citadel, he will try to intercept me. This stays in this room." They both nodded and left. I waited 10 seconds. Then I opened my laptop. I did not go to the hangar. I did not go to my room. I activated a program I had written myself during my training months, a passive sniffer designed to monitor all outgoing signals from the Citadel. The Citadel was a Faraday cage. No signal could get out unless it went through our encrypted satellites. But if someone had a bypass, a direct line to the outside, this program would see the energy spike. I sat in the dark office, watching the frequency wave on the screen. It was a flat green line. 1 hour passed. The silence was heavy. I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was no traitor. Maybe Lance was just that good. Then, at 1 hour and 45 minutes, the line jumped. A spike, sharp and red. Someone was transmitting. It was a burst transmission, highly compressed, designed to look like static background noise. But to my software, it was a scream. "Got you," I hissed. I typed furiously, triangulating the source of the signal within the complex. The locator pinged, West Wing, residential sector, room 4B. My stomach dropped. Room 4B was not the barracks where Silas slept. Room 4B was a suite filled with knitted blankets, porcelain figurines, and the smell of lavender. It was Ingrid's room. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted it to be Silas. I wanted it to be anyone but her. But the data did not lie. The woman who had made me soup when I was sick had just sent my flight path to the man who wanted to kill me. I stood up, pulling my gun from its holster. I checked the chamber, the metallic click sounding impossibly loud. I did not call for backup. This was personal. I walked down the corridor, my footsteps silent on the carpet. I reached her door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open. Ingrid was sitting in her rocking chair, knitting. The television was on low volume, playing an old sitcom. She looked up as I entered, a smile forming on her face. "Jeanette, dear," she said warmly, "I finished packing your bag. It is by the bed." I raised the gun and pointed it directly at her chest. "Put the knitting needles down. Ingrid," I said, my voice shaking with rage. Ingrid froze. She looked at the gun, then at my face. For a moment, she played the part. Her eyes widened in confusion. "Jeanette, what are you doing? It is me. Ingrid, why are you pointing that thing at me?" "I said put them down," I shouted. "And tell Marcus Thorne that his interception team is going to be waiting a long time in Nevada." The name hit her like a physical blow. The mask slipped. It was terrifying to watch. The warmth, the kindness, the confusion, it all drained away from her face in an instant. Her posture changed. She stopped hunching. She sat up straight, her shoulders squaring. The gentle light in her eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. She set the knitting needles down on the side table, moving with a grace that a 70-year-old woman should not possess. She reached over and turned off the television. "You are smarter than your mother," Ingrid said. Her voice was different. The slight wobble of age was gone. It was smooth, deep, and devoid of affection. Serafina never suspected a thing, not in 30 years. 30 years, I choked out. You have been lying to us for 30 years. I am a patient woman, Ingrid said. Crossing her legs, she did not look afraid of the gun. And revenge is a dish best served cold, or in this case, over a lifetime. Who are you? I asked, stepping closer. You are not just a mole, you are too close. Ingrid smiled, a thin, cruel expression that looked eerily familiar. You really do not see the resemblance. People used to say Marcus and I had the same nose. My grip on the gun tightened. You are his sister. Ingrid Thorne, she confirmed. The eldest? Everyone thinks Marcus runs the Vipera clan, but Marcus is a hothead. He is the muscle. I have always been the brain. I infiltrated your mother's household before you were even born. I raised you. Jeanette, I shaped you. You sold me, I accused, tears stinging my eyes. You told Lance about the trust fund that did not exist. You gave him my schedule. You set me up to be trafficked. I needed you out of the way, Ingrid said with a shrug. But I did not want to kill you, not yet. You were a contingency plan. If Serafina proved too difficult to break, I was going to have Marcus buy you back and send your mother a finger every week until she surrendered the veil. She stood up slowly. I tensed, ready to fire. But Lance, she sighed, shaking her head. Greedy little man. He went off script. He was supposed to hold you, not sell you to Silas. That complicated things. But it worked out in the end. Serafina is dying. The veil is crumbling. And here you are, a scared little girl playing with a gun. I am not scared, I said, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. And I am not playing. Oh, please, Ingrid scoffed. I changed your diapers. I wiped your nose. You cannot shoot me. You love me. She took a step toward me. Give me the gun. Jeanette, let us end this charade. The era of the Norcross women is over. The era of the Viper has begun. You poisoned her, I whispered. You put poison in her tea, every morning. It was painless, Ingrid said. More than she deserved. She took another step. Give it to me. I looked at the woman who had been my second mother. I saw the monsters hiding behind her eyes. I saw the betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. You are right, I said softly. I do love the woman who raised me. Ingrid smirked, reaching for the weapon. But that woman never existed. I finished. I did not shoot her. That would have been too quick. Instead, I channeled every lesson from the Purgatory Protocol. I sidestepped her reaching hand, grabbed her wrist, and twisted. Ingrid was fast, shockingly fast for her age. She countered, sweeping my leg. I hit the floor hard, the gun skittering away under the bed. She was on me in a second. Her hands that had baked cookies clamped around my throat. Her grip was like steel. Stupid girl, she hissed, her face inches from mine. I taught you how to walk. I can teach you how to die. I gagged, black spots dancing in my vision. She was stronger than me. She had decades of experience, but she made one mistake. She thought she was fighting Jeanette. I jammed my thumbs into the soft pressure points inside her elbows. She gasped, her grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was enough. I bucked my hips, throwing her off balance, and rolled. We scrambled to our feet. Ingrid pulled a ceramic shard from a broken vase on the table. I stood empty-handed. Checkmate, she sneered. Not quite, I said. I tapped the small panic button on my belt. The door behind me burst open. Silas Vane filled the doorway, his weapon raised. Behind him were 4 elite guards. Ingrid froze. She looked at the guards, then at me. She realized instantly that she was cornered. You signaled them before you came in, she realized, her eyes narrowing. I told you, I said, my voice raspy from her chokehold. I am not playing. Ingrid dropped the shard. She raised her hands, but her face was defiant. You cannot hold me, she declared. Marcus is coming. He is already here. Let him come, I said, signaling the guards to take her, because now I have something he wants, as they dragged her away. She laughed. It was a high, cackling sound that chilled me to the bone. You think you have won, she shouted back. You have no idea what is waiting for you. Little bird, the poison was just the beginning. The antidote, Marcus has it, and he's not going to trade it for me. He is going to make you choose. The guards shoved her out, leaving me alone in the room that smelled of lavender and betrayal. I sank onto the bed, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I had found the traitor. I had saved the veil. But as her words echoed in my mind, I realized the nightmare was far from over. Marcus Thorne had the antidote. My mother was dying, and to save her, I would have to walk into the snake pit. I picked up the knitting needles from the floor and snapped them in half. I am coming for you, Marcus, I whispered, and I am bringing hell with me. The interrogation room was a cube of polished steel and fluorescent light, designed to strip away a prisoner's sense of time and hope. But Ingrid Thorne sat in the bolted-down chair as if she were holding court at a high tea. Her hands, still red from where the zip ties had cut into her wrists, rested calmly on the metal table. She was not afraid. That terrified me more than her violence ever could. I stood on the other side of the one-way glass. Watching her, Silas stood beside me, his jaw set so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. She is too calm, Silas murmured. We have her dead to rights. Treason, attempted murder, conspiracy. She should be bargaining for her life. She is not bargaining because she thinks she still holds the cards, I said, my voice cold. I pressed the button on the intercom. Ingrid, it is over. We have your communications logs. We have the poison analysis. You are going to die in a hole so deep the devil won't find you, unless you tell me where the antidote is. Ingrid looked directly at the mirror, her eyes locking onto mine as if the glass were not there. She smiled, a chilling expression that revealed the predator beneath the grandmotherly mask. Jeanette, dear, she said, her voice distorted by the speaker. You really do not understand the game, do you? You think capturing a pawn ends the match. You are not a pawn, I said. You are the traitor. I am a distraction, she corrected. And while you were busy playing detective in my bedroom, Marcus was busy making an acquisition. She leaned forward, her breath fogging the glass of the camera lens. You remember Sarah, don't you, sweet bubbly Sarah, the one who dragged you to karaoke on Thursday nights, the one who is currently working the night shift at Seattle General. My blood turned to ice. Sarah, my college roommate, my best friend, the only person in the world who knew me as just Jeanette, the girl who liked bad romantic comedies and extra cheese on her pizza. I had cut off contact with her 6 months ago to protect her. I thought I had ghosted her successfully. What did you do? I whispered, though I knew the microphone picked it up. Marcus picked her up an hour ago, Ingrid said casually. She screamed quite a bit. Something about having a patient to attend to. She is very dedicated. It is a shame she is going to die tonight. If you touch her, I started, slamming my hand against the glass. Oh, I won't touch her, Ingrid interrupted. But Marcus, he is not known for his gentle touch. He is waiting for your call. Phoenix, I suggest you pick up the phone. As if on cue, the secure line in the command center began to ring. It was a red phone that sat on my mother's desk, a line reserved for catastrophic emergencies. I ran to the office, Silas on my heels. I snatched the receiver up. Where is she? I demanded. Hello to you too, little niece, a voice boomed on the other end. It was deep, gravelly, and dripping with arrogance. Marcus Thorne. Your friend is hanging in there, literally. I have her suspended over a vat of industrial acid. It is very cinematic. Let her go, Marcus, I said, gripping the phone so tight the plastic creaked. This is between you and the veil. She is a civilian. She is leverage, Marcus replied. And right now, she is the only reason your mother gets to live. Ingrid tells me Serafina has about 12 hours before her nervous system shuts down completely. I have the antidote. I have the girl. You have 2 things I want. Name them, I said. First, I want the master encryption keys to the Veil's mainframe, the source code. I want to own your network. And the second, the head of Silas Vane, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a growl. He embarrassed my men in Mexico. I want his head, detached from his body, delivered in a box. I looked at Silas. He was watching me, listening to the call on the speaker. He did not flinch. He simply nodded, reaching for his knife as if offering to do the deed himself right there. You have 6 hours, Marcus continued. Come to the old petrochem refinery in the Louisiana Bayou. Come alone. If I see a single drone, a single satellite sweep, or anyone other than you, the girl drops, and the antidote goes down the drain with her. Tick-tock. Phoenix. The line went dead. I slammed the phone down. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. I will do it, Silas said immediately. My life for the mistress, and for the girl. It is a fair trade. No, I said sharp and immediate. He wants a head. Jeanette, Silas argued. Give him mine. We cannot risk the source code, but we can fake the keys. But he will check the DNA on the head. I am not cutting off your head. Silas, I shouted, turning to face him. And I am not giving him the veil. If I give him the keys, he controls the world's secrets. He will hunt down every agent we have. Thousands will die. Then what? Silas asked, his frustration showing. We let your mother die. We let your friend dissolve in acid. The board will vote to sacrifice Sarah. They will say she is acceptable collateral damage. The board does not run this family, I said, my voice lowering to a dangerous calm. I do. I walked over to the large digital map on the wall and zoomed in on Louisiana. The petrochem refinery was a labyrinth of rusting towers, catwalks, and storage tanks. It was a nightmare for an assault team. Too many sightlines, too many fatal drop-offs. He said, "Come alone," I muttered, studying the schematics. He said no drones, no satellite sweeps. He will have thermal sensors, Silas pointed out. Snipers on the high ground. If we try to sneak a team in, they will spot the heat signatures in the swamp. He is expecting a scared girl, I said. He is expecting me to walk in there desperate, crying, begging to trade. I touched the pendant around my neck, the storm's eye. It was not just a symbol, it was a key. Get the board on the line, I ordered, and get me General Holloway at the Pentagon. Use the Omega frequency. Silas's eyes widened. General Holloway, that is a burned contact. Serafina swore never to use him unless the world was ending. The world is ending, I said. My world. 10 minutes later, I stood before the holographic projections of the Veil's board of directors. 5 men and women, faces obscured by shadows, voices altered. You cannot go, the chairman said, his voice metallic. The girl, Sarah, is regrettable, but the source code is the foundation of our existence. You cannot trade the kingdom for a peasant. I am not asking for permission, I said, staring into the camera lens. I am informing you. I am going to Louisiana, and I am taking the codes. We will remove you from command, a female director threatened. We will lock down the facility. Try it, I challenged. I have the storm's eye. I have the biometric override. If you lock me out, I will burn the entire database to the ground before I leave. Do you want a leader who fights, or do you want ashes? The board fell silent. They were calculators, risk assessors. They knew I was not bluffing. You have 12 hours, the chairman finally said. If you fail, We initiate the Scorch Protocol. We will nuke the refinery to protect the secrets. I won't fail, I said, and cut the connection. I turned to Silas. Suit up. We are going hunting. But the thermal sensors, Silas reminded me. He will see us coming. Not if we blind him, I said. I picked up the secure phone and dialed the number for General Halloway. It rang twice. This line is dead, a gruff voice answered. The storm is overhead, I said, reciting the code phrase my mother had made me memorize. And the eye is open. There was a pause. Serafina, her daughter, I said. I need a favor. I need the Keyhole 12 satellite repositioned over the Mississippi Delta. I do not want a sweep. I want an intense, localized electromagnetic burst, targeted interference. That is $1 billion piece of hardware, the general growled. You want me to risk frying it to jam some radio signals? I want you to create a ghost storm, I corrected. I want the thermal sensors in that refinery to read 100 degrees in every direction. I want their radar to see 1,000 targets. I want 5 minutes of absolute electronic chaos. And what do I get? You get the file on the senator who has been blocking your budget appropriation, I said. The one with the mistress in Dia. See? The general laughed, a dry barking sound. Your mother raised you well. You have your 5 minutes. 0 hour is midnight. Thank you. General. I hung up and looked at Silas. We have a window. When the burst hits, their sensors will be useless. Their comms will be static. We move in then. Silas asked. I go in the front door, I explained, pulling up a 3D model of the refinery. I walk in with the suitcase. I play the part. I keep Marcus focused on me. You and the Alpha team insert here, at the drainage outflow. It is underwater, so no heat signature until you surface. You climb the west tower. I need you to secure the high ground and neutralize his snipers before the jamming ends. It is a suicide mission for you, Silas said quietly. Walking in there alone, if Marcus decides to shoot you before you open the suitcase? He won't, I said, touching the scar on my arm from the training. He is arrogant. He wants to gloat. He wants to see Serafina's daughter beg. I am going to give him a show. We landed the stealth transport 5 miles out in the bayou. The air was thick enough to chew, smelling of sulfur and decaying vegetation. The humidity plastered my hair to my forehead instantly. I wore a simple black tactical suit, no armor that would be visible, carrying a silver Halliburton case. Inside was not the source code, but a sophisticated logic bomb that, once plugged into a mainframe, would fry the processor. Radio silence from here, I whispered to Silas in the darkness of the swamp. He was dressed in a wetsuit, his face painted black, looking like a demon of the marsh. Stay alive, Phoenix, he said, gripping my shoulder. See you in hell. Silas, I replied with a grim smile. He slipped into the black water without a ripple. I began the walk. It took me an hour to reach the refinery gates. The structure loomed out of the fog like the skeleton of a dead beast. Rusting pipes twisted like intestines, and the flare towers pierced the night sky. The only light came from portable floodlights set up in the central courtyard. I walked down the main access road, my heels crunching on the gravel. I held the suitcase in both hands, keeping them visible. I felt the crosshairs on me. I knew there were snipers in the gantries. I forced myself to walk slowly, to project fear and hesitation. I reached the center of the illuminated circle. I am here, I shouted, my voice echoing off the metal tanks. I brought what you asked for. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind whistling through the pipes. Then, a spotlight clicked on, blinding me. Drop the case, Marcus Thorne's voice boomed from a loudspeaker. I knelt slowly and placed the case on the ground. Kick it over to the gate, he commanded. No, I shouted back, shielding my eyes. Show me Sarah, and show me the antidote, or I detonate this case and blow us all to pieces. A door opened on the second-level catwalk of the main distillation tower. Marcus Thorne stepped out. He was a giant of a man, wearing a tactical vest over a silk shirt. He held a vial of blue liquid in one hand. Behind him, a crane whirred to life. A chain descended, and dangling from it, bound and gagged, was Sarah. She was suspended over a vat that fumed with noxious yellow smoke. She looked terrifyingly small. Her eyes were wide, filled with a panic that broke my heart. "There she is," Marcus laughed. "And here is the cure. Now, where is Silas's head?" "Silas is dead." I lied, my voice trembling. "I killed him myself. His body is in the trunk of the car I left at the perimeter." I could not bring myself to cut it off. "Pathetic," Marcus sneered. "Just like your mother. Weak." He leaned over the railing. "Bring the case up here, and if you make one wrong move, Sarah takes a bath." I picked up the case. I checked my watch. 11:59. I started to climb the metal stairs. My heart beat a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 1 minute. I needed 1 minute of stalling. "Marcus," I called out as I climbed. "Why are you doing this? The Veil and the Vipera could have coexisted. Why start a war you cannot win? Cannot win." Marcus laughed, spreading his arms. "Look around you, little girl. I have already won. Your mother is a vegetable, your fortress is compromised, and you are walking into my slaughterhouse." I reached the top of the stairs. I was 10 feet away from him. Sarah was dangling 20 feet to my left. "Open the case," Marcus ordered, pointing a heavy revolver at my chest. I set the case down on the grate. I undid the latches. "It is a complex lock," I said, fumbling with the dials. "My hands are shaking." "Hurry up," Marcus barked. I looked at the second hand on my watch. 5, 4, 3. "I am trying." I cried out. 2, 1, 0. High above us, in the cold vacuum of space. The Keyhole 12 satellite unleashed an invisible pulse of electromagnetic fury. The floodlights flickered and died. The loudspeaker let out a piercing screech of feedback. The hum of the refinery's automated systems groaned and went silent. The electronic lock on the crane holding Sarah froze. For a split second, the refinery was plunged into total darkness. "Now!" I screamed into the comms, praying the short-range frequency still worked through the interference. From the shadows of the West Tower, a muzzle flash lit up the night. Thwip! The guard standing next to the crane controls crumpled, a hole in his forehead. "What the—" Marcus roared, looking around in confusion as his tactical headset filled with static. I didn't waste the moment. I kicked the suitcase. It slid across the metal grate, slamming into Marcus's shins. He stumbled, firing his gun wildly into the air. I drew my weapon, a suppressed P226, from the holster at the small of my back. But I didn't shoot Marcus. I shot the hydraulic line of the crane arm. The hose burst, spraying fluid. The arm sagged, swinging Sarah away from the acid vat and toward the catwalk. "Kill her!" Marcus screamed to his men in the darkness. "Kill them all!" But his men were blind. Their night vision goggles were washed out by the electromagnetic burst, and my team, surfacing from the swamp like wraiths, was not. Chaos erupted. Gunfire flashed from every corner of the refinery. I sprinted toward Sarah. Marcus recovered his balance and lunged at me, his knife drawn. "You little bitch!" he roared. I slid under his slash, feeling the wind of the blade pass over my face. I was not training in a gym anymore. This was the real thing. I rolled to my feet, raising my gun. But this wasn't over. I was trapped on a catwalk with a madman. My best friend was hanging by a thread. And the night had just begun. The metal grating of the catwalk vibrated beneath my boots, a constant, buzzing reminder of the chaos erupting around us. The air was thick with the acrid stench of sulfur and the metallic tang of blood. Below us, the chemical vat churned, a yellow, toxic soup that promised a death too horrific to contemplate. Above, the sky was a bruised purple, void of the stars that my mother's satellite had blinded moments ago. I scrambled back, putting distance between myself and Marcus Thorne. The initial clash had been a blur of adrenaline and instinct, but now, the battlefield had paused, holding its breath before the final plunge. Marcus stood by the control console, his chest heaving, a manic grin splitting his face. He looked less like a man and more like a titan carved from granite and cruelty. He held a remote detonator in one hand, a dead man's switch connected to the emergency release of the crane. If his thumb slipped, the hydraulic line I had shot would fully rupture, and Sarah would drop. "You are persistent, little bird," Marcus spat, wiping blood from his lip where the suitcase had struck him. "But you are out of your depth. Look around you." I risked a glance. The electromagnetic burst from the satellite had fried the sensors and blinded the night vision goggles, but it had not erased the enemy. Vipera mercenaries were flooding the gantries, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like searching eyes. And then, I saw him. 2 hulking guards emerged from the stairwell behind me, dragging a figure between them. It was Silas. He was battered, his wetsuit torn, his hands bound tightly behind his back with heavy industrial cable. They threw him to the deck at Marcus's feet. "We found this rat climbing the west tower," one of the guards announced, kicking Silas in the ribs. Silas groaned, curling into himself, looking utterly defeated. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was not the plan. Silas was supposed to be the sniper in the shadows, not a hostage on the floor. The odds had just shifted from desperate to impossible. Marcus laughed, a sound that rumbled deep in his chest. He placed a heavy boot on Silas's neck, pinning him to the grate. "The architect," Marcus mocked, pressing down until Silas gasped for air. "Reduced to a piece of flooring. Is this your master strategy?" "Phoenix, a broken old man, and a faulty plan." I stood tall, forcing my breathing to slow. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. If I showed fear now, Sarah died. If I showed weakness, we all died. I holstered my gun, a gesture that made Marcus frown in confusion. "I am not here to fight you, Marcus," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the wind. "I am here to negotiate." "Negotiate," Marcus scoffed. "You have nothing to trade. I have the girl, I have your dog, and in about 10 minutes, when my tech team overrides your little jamming signal, I will have you." He gestured to the grimy metal floor. "Kneel before the Viper, and maybe I will let your friend die quickly. Maybe I will even let you watch." I looked at Sarah. She was swaying dangerously over the vat, her eyes wide with terror, gagged and helpless. Then I looked at Silas. He met my gaze from the floor. His face was bloodied, but his eyes were clear, sharp, waiting. I looked back at Marcus and smiled. It was the coldest smile I had ever worn. "You misunderstand the situation, Marcus," I said softly. "I am not here to buy my life, and I am certainly not here to buy Sarah's. She knows the risks of being my friend." I took a slow, deliberate step forward. "I am here to buy your life." Marcus blinked, the arrogance faltering for a split second. "What? You think you are the predator?" I continued, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "But you are just a squatter in my mother's house. You want me to kneel, I only kneel to queens. You are just a usurper with a detonator." Marcus's face twisted with rage. "I will dissolve her. I will drop her right now." He raised the remote, his thumb hovering over the button. "Do it," I screamed, calling his bluff. "Drop her, and the moment she hits that liquid, the localized jammer in my pocket triggers the C4 charges I planted on the support pillars while you were busy gloating. We all go down. We all burn. Is that what you want? Marcus, to be king of the ashes." It was a lie. I had no C4, but I had studied Marcus's file. He was a narcissist. He wanted to rule, not to die. He hesitated. His eyes darted to my pocket, then back to my face. That split second of doubt was all we needed. I did not reach for a detonator. I reached for the small, high-frequency emitter on my belt and cranked it to maximum. A piercing, ultrasonic shriek blasted through the immediate area. It was inaudible to human ears, but it wreaked havoc on unshielded electronics. The remote in Marcus's hand sparked and shorted out. The magnetic lock on the crane seized up. Sarah screamed through her gag as the crane jerked to a halt, leaving her dangling precariously, but safe from the drop. Now, Silas, I shouted. The broken, defeated old man on the floor vanished. In his place was the architect. Silas didn't struggle against the heavy cables binding his wrists. He simply snapped them. He had pre-cut the core of the cables, leaving only the outer casing intact, a gamble that relied entirely on being captured. He burst upward like a coiled spring. His hands moved with a blur of speed, pulling two subcompact machine pistols from holsters hidden beneath his torn wetsuit. Burt, two controlled bursts. The guards who had dragged him up collapsed, holes in their chests before they could even raise their rifles. Marcus roared in fury, throwing the useless remote at me and drawing a massive combat knife. "Kill them!" he screamed to the remaining mercenaries on the lower levels. Silas dove behind a stack of barrels, providing covering fire as bullets began to ping off the metalwork around us. "Get the girl!" Silas yelled over the roar of gunfire. "I will hold them off." I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted toward the control panel, intending to override the crane manually and swing Sarah to safety. But Marcus Thorne was faster than I anticipated. He intercepted me halfway. A wall of muscle and malice. He didn't use a gun. He wanted to feel the kill. He lunged with the knife, a vicious swipe aimed at my stomach. I blocked it with a Krav Maga crossarm deflection, but the force of his blow was like being hit by a truck. My bones rattled. I managed to divert the blade, but his other fist slammed into my ribs. I gasped, the air leaving my lungs in a painful whoosh. I stumbled back, tasting blood. "You fight like a child," Marcus sneered, circling me. "Serafina taught you steps. She did not teach you strength." He attacked again. This time, I was ready. I didn't try to block. I used his momentum against him. As he thrust the knife, I pivoted, grabbing his wrist and driving my elbow into his temple. It was a perfect strike. It would have knocked out a normal man. Marcus just grunted and headbutted me. White light exploded behind my eyes. I flew backward, crashing hard onto the metal grate. My gun skittered away. Sliding toward the edge of the platform, I tried to get up, but my body screamed in protest. My ribs felt like shattered glass. Marcus loomed over me, kicking me hard in the stomach. I curled up, wheezing. "Did you really think you could win?" Marcus asked, breathing heavily. He wiped sweat from his forehead. "I have 300 men in this facility. You have an old man and a bluff." He grabbed me by the throat and hauled me to my feet, lifting me off the ground. His grip was crushing. "Say hello to your mother for me," he whispered, raising the knife for the killing stroke. Click. The sound of a hammer being cocked was loud enough to cut through the chaos. Marcus froze. I froze, my feet dangling inches from the floor. We both looked toward the stairwell, standing there, dressed in a pristine gray trench coat that seemed impossibly clean amidst the grime of the refinery. Was Ingrid Thorne. She held a silver revolver in her hand. The barrel was steady. Her face was unreadable. "Ingrid," Marcus breathed, a look of genuine shock crossing his face. "How did you get out?" "The girl's security is as full of holes as her plan," Ingrid said calmly. She stepped onto the platform, her heels clicking rhythmically. She left the door unguarded in her rush to play hero. I stared at her, my vision blurring. This was it, the final betrayal. Ingrid had escaped the Citadel, likely with the help of the sleeper agents she had activated. She had come to finish what she started. "Put her down, Marcus," Ingrid commanded. Marcus grinned, dropping me. I hit the grate hard, gasping for air, clutching my throat. "I knew you would come through, sister." Marcus laughed, stepping toward her. "I knew you were too smart to let these amateurs hold you. Give me the gun. I will finish her." Ingrid did not lower the weapon. She kept it trained on the space between us. "The antidote," she said. "Give it to me." Marcus paused. "What?" "The antidote for Serafina," Ingrid repeated. "You have it in your pocket. Hand it over." "Why do you care?" Marcus asked, his eyes narrowing. "Serafina is dead weight. We have the Empire now. We have everything. I want the antidote." Marcus, Ingrid said, her voice hardening. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. You always were sentimental. Fine. We can keep the old witch alive as a trophy. He reached into his vest and pulled out the blue vial. He held it up. Here, come and get it. I watched, helpless, as the two siblings stood facing each other. Silas was pinned down by gunfire 20 feet away. Sarah was still dangling, and I was unarmed at the feet of the man who wanted to kill me. Ingrid walked forward. She passed me without a glance. She stopped 3 feet from Marcus. We did it, Marcus grinned, relaxing. The Thorne dynasty starts tonight. He reached out to hand her the vial. Ingrid took it with her left hand, and with her right hand, she leveled the revolver directly at my forehead. My heart stopped. You are right, brother, Ingrid said, her eyes locking onto mine. They were cold, dead things. The dynasty does start tonight. She cocked her head, looking at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. Any last words? Phoenix. I looked at the barrel of the gun. I looked at the woman who had raised me. I looked at the vial in her other hand, the only thing that could save my mother. I was trapped. I was beaten. Just one, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Go on, Ingrid urged, her finger tightening on the trigger. I looked past her, at the shadow moving silently along the upper pipe rack behind Marcus, a shadow that had not been part of the plan, but was a variable Ingrid had forgotten. Duck, I said. Ingrid frowned. What? Before she could fire, the shadow dropped. It wasn't a person. It was the heavy steel hook of the auxiliary winch, released by a well-aimed shot from Silas's position. It swung down in a lethal arc, smashing into the platform between Marcus and Ingrid. The impact shook the entire tower. The metal grating buckled. Marcus lost his footing. Stumbling backward toward the railing, Ingrid was thrown to the side, the gun firing a wild shot into the air. The blue vial containing my mother's life, flew from her hand. It spun through the air, catching the light of the tracers, arching out over the edge of the catwalk, toward the vat of acid below. No, I screamed. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I launched myself off the floor, diving toward the edge of the abyss, reaching for the spinning glass that held my world. I was suspended in midair, gravity taking hold, the yellow fumes rising to meet me. My fingers brushed the cool glass. I clamped my hand around it, but I was falling. I had thrown myself over the edge. I braced for the burn, but the burn didn't come. Instead, a hand rough, calloused, and strong grabbed my ankle. I swung violently, slamming into the side of the catwalk, dangling by one leg. I looked up. Marcus Thorne was holding me. He wasn't saving me. He was smiling. Caught you, he grunted. He looked at the vial in my hand, then at the acid below. You want to save your mother? He asked, pulling a second knife from his boot. Then you are going to have to learn to fly. He raised the knife to cut the lace of his own boot, to sever the grip, to drop me, but he had forgotten one thing. Ingrid was still on the platform, and she was standing up. The gunshot was deafening, a thunderclap that signaled the end of the world. I flinched, my eyes squeezing shut as I hung over the abyss, waiting for the bullet to tear through my skull, or for Marcus to sever the hand that held me. I waited for the fall. I waited for the burning death of the acid, but I did not fall. Instead, a wet, heavy sound echoed from above, the sound of a body hitting the metal grate. What have you done? Marcus's voice roared. But it was not directed at me. It was vibrating with genuine, bewildered shock. I opened my eyes and looked up. Marcus was still holding my ankle, but his face was turned toward the catwalk behind him. His knife was frozen halfway to his bootlace. 10 feet away, a mercenary lay dead on the floor, a smoking hole in the center of his forehead. He had been emerging from the shadows of the machinery, rifle raised, aiming directly at my exposed back. I had not seen him. Marcus had not seen him, but Ingrid had. Ingrid stood like a statue of judgment in her gray trench coat, the revolver in her hand smoking gently in the humid air. She was not looking at the dead man. She was looking at Marcus. "Pull her up, brother," Ingrid commanded. Her voice was no longer the terrifying, cold rasp of the traitor I thought I knew. It was calm, authoritative, and laced with a steel that I recognized instantly. It was the voice of a woman who had spent a lifetime in the shadows. "You missed," Marcus stammered, his eyes darting from his sister to the dead merc. "You aimed at her, and you missed." "I never miss," Ingrid said. Taking a step forward, she cocked the hammer of the revolver again. "I said, pull her up, or the next one goes through your knee." Marcus hesitated, his face a mask of confusion and rage, but the gun was steady. With a snarl of frustration, he hauled me upward. I scrabbled at the grating, my muscles screaming, and rolled onto the solid metal platform. Clutching the blue vial to my chest, I scrambled back, putting distance between myself and the man who wanted to kill me, and looked at the woman who I thought had betrayed me. "Ingrid," I whispered, my voice hoarse, "what is happening?" "Get behind me. Phoenix," she said, not taking her eyes off Marcus. Marcus stood up, wiping grease from his hands. He looked at his sister as if seeing a stranger. "Ingrid, put the gun down. We have won. Serafina is finished. We are the kings of the world. Why are you shooting my men?" "We," Ingrid laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "There is no we, Marcus. There never was." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small silver insignia. She tossed it onto the grate between them. It clattered and spun, coming to rest in the dim light. It was not a viper. It was a shield, the crest of the veil. "I am not a defector," Ingrid said, her voice ringing out across the refinery. "I am a sleeper agent, level 10 clearance. I have been Serafina Norcross's eyes and ears inside your family for 30 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stared at the badge, his face draining of color. I stared at Ingrid, my mind reeling, trying to reassemble the pieces of the puzzle. 30 years, Marcus whispered. "But you raised her. You poisoned Serafina. You sold the girl." "I raised Jeanette because Serafina trusted me with her most precious asset," Ingrid corrected. "I did not poison Serafina. She took a synthetic mimic drug that simulates neurodegeneration. We staged her illness to make you bold, Marcus, to make you think the lioness was dying so the hyena would finally come out of his hole." She glanced at me, a flicker of warmth returning to her eyes, the grandmotherly warmth I remembered, but sharper now. "And I did not sell her. I managed the sale. When Lance went rogue, we had to improvise. The plan was always to bring you here, Marcus, to this refinery, to a place where we could end you and your entire bloodline in one night. The betrayal inside the Citadel," I stammered. "The signal from your room. A broadcast I sent on Serafina's orders," Ingrid said. "We needed you to find me. We needed you to hate me. Because if you did not hate me, you would not have come here with the fury required to survive. You needed to be forged, Jeanette, and nothing forges a soul like betrayal." Marcus let out a roar, a sound of pure, animalistic fury. The realization that he had been played, that his entire coup was a puppet show orchestrated by the woman he sought to overthrow, broke something inside him. "You think you have won," Marcus screamed, his veins bulging in his neck. "You think you can trap the viper." He reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a heavy, blocky device, a detonator. "I wired this whole facility," Marcus yelled, his thumb hovering over the red button. "The pillars, the tanks, the foundation. If I die, everyone dies, I will burn you all." "Don't," I shouted. Stepping forward, Marcus looked at me, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "You want to be a queen? Then reign over hell." He slammed his thumb down on the button. Beep, beep, beep. A computerized voice echoed from the loudspeakers, cutting through the chaos. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. T-3 minutes. 3 minutes. Marcus laughed maniacally. "Run, rats, run, and see if you can outrun the fire." He threw the detonator into the acid vat and drew his combat knife again, But he didn't run. He lunged at me. "I am taking you with me," he shrieked. "Jeanette, move!" Ingrid shouted, firing her revolver. The bullet struck Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around, but he was fueled by adrenaline and madness. He ignored the wound, turning his momentum into a backhand strike that knocked the gun from Ingrid's hand. She fell back, hitting her head on the railing. "Ingrid!" I screamed. Marcus turned back to me, the knife gleaming. He was fast, terrifyingly fast. He slashed, the blade cutting through the air inches from my throat. I dodged, retreating, but I was backed against the control console. "Serafina is not here to save you now," Marcus hissed, closing the distance. "And your little tricks won't work twice." He thrust the knife at my heart. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the sweat on his brow. I saw the madness in his eyes. I saw the knife coming. I did not block. I did not retreat. I remembered the lesson Silas had taught me on day 42 of the Purgatory Protocol. When the enemy expects you to defend, you attack. When he expects a weapon, you become one. My hand flew to the inside pocket of my tactical vest. I didn't pull a gun. I pulled a pen. It was a solid steel tactical pen, a gift from Silas after I passed my first interrogation test, as Marcus's knife grazed my ribs, tearing the fabric of my suit. I stepped into his guard. I slammed the pointed tip of the steel pen directly into the soft cluster of nerves at the base of his neck, right where the shoulder meets the clavicle. It was a precision strike, a lethal acupuncture. Marcus's eyes widened. He made a choking sound. His hand opened, and the knife clattered to the floor. The nerve strike had paralyzed his right arm instantly, but I was not done. I grabbed his head with both hands, twisting his body, and used his own weight to drive a knee into his solar plexus. The air left him in a rush. He crumpled to his knees, gasping, clutching his neck. I stood over him, breathing hard, the tactical pen still gripped in my hand. "Serafina didn't teach me that," I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "I learned that on my own." Behind me, the countdown blared. 2 minutes remaining. "Jeanette," I turned. Silas had limped onto the platform. He was battered, bleeding, but alive. He had cleared the remaining guards on the lower level. He rushed to Sarah, who was still dangling from the crane. "Get her down!" I yelled. Silas didn't waste time with controls. He shot the locking mechanism of the harness. Sarah fell the last few feet onto the catwalk, sobbing, collapsing into Silas's arms. Ingrid was sitting up, holding her head. She looked at me, then pointed to the blue vial I was still clutching in my left hand. "Jeanette," she called out, "throw it away." "What?" I asked, confused. "It is the antidote. I saved it." "That is colored water," Ingrid shouted, struggling to her feet. "Marcus is a liar. He would never carry the real thing in a glass vial during a fight." She reached into the lining of her trench coat and pulled out a small, metal canister. "I lifted this off him when he hugged me. This is the cure." I looked at the blue glass in my hand, then hurled it into the acid vat. It hissed and vanished. 1 minute remaining, the voice announced. Marcus was crawling. He was dragging his paralyzed body across the floor. He was not crawling toward us. He was crawling toward a secondary panel on the wall, a manual override for the sector charges. He wanted to speed up the explosion. He wanted to ensure we didn't make it to the exit. I walked over to him. He looked up at me, blood bubbling from his lips. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a gurgle. "You," he wheezed. "You cannot kill me. You are soft. You are Serafina's daughter. She puts people on trial. She holds back." I looked down at him. I thought of the shipping container. I thought of Lance. I thought of my mother lying in a coma. I thought of the fear that had ruled my life for 24 years. Jeanette Norcross would have hesitated. Jeanette Norcross would have waited for the police. But Jeanette Norcross was dead. "You are right," I said, my voice cold and flat, devoid of any emotion. "I am not her. Serafina is a queen. She believes in justice." I raised my boot. "I am the upgrade," I whispered. "I believe in efficiency." I stomped down hard, not on his head, not on his chest. I stomped on his good hand, the hand that was reaching for the override lever. The force of my kick shattered his fingers, driving his hand down onto the console. But I didn't just break his hand, I guided it. I forced his broken palm down onto a specific button, the button that controlled the fire suppression system lockout for this specific tower, the button that sealed the blast doors to the catwalk we were standing on. The heavy steel doors slammed shut behind me, sealing Marcus inside the central chamber. We were on the outside. He was on the inside with the main charge. Marcus stared at me through the reinforced glass of the door window. His eyes were wide with realization. He wasn't just defeated. He was entombed. "Goodbye, Marcus," I said. "Run," Silas shouted, grabbing Sarah. We sprinted. We ran down the external stairs, our boots clanging on the metal. We ran past the dead guards. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs felt like lead. 30 seconds. We hit the gravel of the access road. Ingrid was lagging behind. I grabbed her arm, half carrying her. "Come on," I yelled. "Do not stop." We reached the perimeter fence just as the countdown hit 0. There was no sound at first, just a flash of white light that turned the night into day. Then, the ground heaved. A shockwave knocked us flat into the mud. The refinery disintegrated. The central tower, where Marcus Thorne lay broken and defeated, vanished in a pillar of fire that reached for the heavens. The heat washed over us, intense and blistering. Even from this distance, I lay in the mud, covering my head, feeling the earth shake. The roar was apocalyptic. Metal shrieked as it was torn apart. The sky rained debris. Then, slowly, the noise faded to the crackle of massive fires. I lifted my head. The refinery was gone. The snake pit was a crater. Silas was helping Sarah sit up. She was crying, shaking uncontrollably. "Jeanette," she sobbed. "Jeanette." I crawled over to her and pulled her into my arms. "I am here. Sarah, I am here. It is over." Ingrid sat nearby, wiping mud from her trench coat. She looked at the burning inferno, then at me. She held up the metal canister. "We have the antidote," she said softly. "The Queen will live." I looked at the fire, watching the flames consume the last traces of the man who had tried to sell me, the man who had tried to break me. I reached up and touched the storm's eye pendant. It was hot against my skin. "Let's go home," I said, standing up and pulling Sarah to her feet. "I have a board meeting to attend." 2 weeks is a strange amount of time. It is long enough for bruises to fade to yellow, for broken ribs to knit together enough to allow a deep breath, and for the ashes of a refinery in Louisiana to cool into dust. But it is also short enough that the echo of the explosion still rang in my ears whenever the room got too quiet. The room, however, was rarely quiet these days. I sat at the head of a table made of black obsidian, a surface so polished it looked like a pool of dark water. Around me sat the 12 members of the Vale's High Council. These were men and women who controlled shipping lanes, influenced elections, and could crash a stock market with a single text message. 2 weeks ago, they had threatened to remove me. 2 weeks ago, they had voted to let Sarah die. Now, they did not look me in the eye unless I addressed them first. "The audit of the Asian sector is complete," I said, my voice projecting clearly without the need to raise it. I tapped the tablet in front of me. "We have identified 14 subcontractors who were funneling data to Marcus Thorne. Their contracts have been terminated." "Terminated, Mistress?" the chairman asked, his voice respectful, almost fearful. "Does that mean liquidated?" "It means their access is revoked. Their assets are frozen, and they are currently being escorted to federal prisons by anonymous tip-offs," I corrected. "We are not butchers. We are surgeons. We cut out the rot, but we do not splatter blood on the walls unless necessary. Is that understood?" "Understood," the council murmured in unison. I looked to the corner of the room. My mother sat in a sleek, motorized wheelchair. She was still frail, her skin pale, and a blanket was draped over her legs. The recovery from the mimic poison was slow, and her doctor said it would be months before she could walk without assistance. But her mind was sharper than a diamond. She watched me with a gaze that was unreadable to the others, but I knew it well. It was not just pride, it was relief. She was watching her legacy secure itself in real time. "Dismissed," I said. The council members stood and filed out, bowing slightly as they passed me. When the heavy doors clicked shut, the silence returned. "You were lenient with the Singapore branch," Serafina noted, wheeling herself closer to the table. "Thorne bought their loyalty cheaply. They deserved worse than prison." "Prison for men like that is worse than death," I replied, standing up and walking to the window. "They are used to five-star hotels and absolute power. Sharing a cell with a common thief will break their spirits faster than a bullet." Serafina chuckled softly. "You have developed a terrifying sense of pragmatism. My daughter, it suits you." I looked out at the city skyline. We were in the penthouse of the Norcross Tower, the public face of our empire. Below us, millions of people were going about their lives, rushing to meetings, buying coffee, falling in love, getting their hearts broken. They had no idea that the world they lived in was held together by the decisions made in this room. They had no idea how close it had all come to burning down. "I had good teachers," I said. I walked over to the secure communications console on the wall. There was one piece of business left, one loose thread that needed to be cut. "Silas," I said into the intercom, "is the link established?" "Ready when you are, mistress," Silas's voice replied. "Put it on the main screen." The obsidian wall shifted, revealing a massive high-definition display. The image that flickered to life was grainy, transmitted via satellite from halfway across the world. It was a pit, a literal hole in the red earth of Sierra Leone. The sun was beating down with merciless intensity. Men were moving back and forth, carrying heavy baskets of rocks, their bodies coated in dust and sweat. Armed guards stood on the perimeter, indifferent to the suffering. The camera zoomed in on one figure. He was unrecognizable from the man who had worn Italian suits and ordered vintage champagne. His head was shaved unevenly. His skin was burned dark by the sun and covered in insect bites. He was gaunt, his ribs showing through his tattered shirt. He stumbled under the weight of a basket, falling to his knees in the mud. A guard shouted something and prodded him with a baton. The man scrambled up, terrified, desperate to please. "Zoom in on his face," I ordered. The camera adjusted. I looked into the eyes of Lance Sterling. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. There was only a hollow, haunting emptiness. He looked like an animal that had forgotten it was ever human. "Can he hear me?" I asked. "Yes," Silas confirmed. "I have patched into the camp's PA system. He will hear you." I pressed the button. "Hello, Lance?" My voice boomed across the camp in Africa. On the screen, Lance froze. He dropped his basket. He looked around wildly, spinning in circles, trying to find the source of the sound. "Jeanette," he croaked, his voice dry and cracked. "Jeanette, is that you? Oh, God. Jeanette, please." He fell to his knees, looking up at the sky as if talking to a deity. Tears cut tracks through the dirt on his face. "I am sorry, I am so sorry. Get me out of here. I will do anything, I will tell you everything." "I know everything. Lance," I said, my voice cool and detached. "I know about Mockingbird. I know about the payments. I know you were just a puppet." "Yes, I was a puppet," he sobbed. "I was weak. Please, Jeanette, you loved me once. Remember us." I watched him beg. I waited for a pang of pity. I waited for a flicker of the love I had nurtured for 3 years. I waited for guilt, but there was nothing. It was like looking at a stranger. No, it was less than that. It was like looking at a bad memory that had already begun to fade. "I remember a girl who trusted you," I said. "But that girl died in a shipping container. You killed her. Lance, you sold her for $2 million. No, no, no," he wailed, clawing at his face. Have mercy. This is mercy, I said. I could have let Marcus Thorne find you. Instead, I gave you a job. You wanted to make money. Lance, now you are digging for it. Enjoy your investment. Jeanette, he screamed, a sound of pure despair. Goodbye, Lance. I signaled Silas to cut the feed. The screen went black. The screaming stopped. I stood there for a moment. Staring at the blank wall, I felt lighter. The last tether to my past life had been severed. Cold, Serafina observed from behind me. But necessary. He does not exist anymore, I said. Turning back to the room, the door opened, and Silas walked in. He was wearing a new suit, immaculate as always. Though he walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from the refinery, he carried a silver tray with a single envelope on it. Mistress, he said, bowing low. This just arrived from the private airfield. I took the envelope. It was scented with lavender. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Sarah. I had said goodbye to her 3 days ago. We had met in a safe house near the Canadian border. I had given her a new identity, a deed to a house in Vancouver, and a bank account that would ensure she never had to work another night shift. She had hugged me, but her body had been stiff. She had looked at the gun on my hip, then at my eyes, and I saw the fear. She loved me, but she was terrified of what I had become. We both knew we could not go back to sharing popcorn and watching movies. I was radioactive to her world. I opened the letter. Inside was a photo of us from college, laughing at a beach bonfire. On the back, she had written, "To the girl who saved my life, I will miss Jeanette, but the world needs Phoenix more. Be safe." I felt a lump in my throat, a small, sharp pain of loss, but I tucked the photo into my jacket pocket, right next to my heart. It was a reminder of what I was fighting to protect. "Is Ingrid settled?" I asked Silas to distract myself. "Yes," Silas nodded. "She has taken up residence in the cottage on the Isle of Skye. She says the sheep are better conversationalists than the board of directors. She sends her regards and says she has left a knitting pattern for you. Should you ever decide to retire?" I laughed. The idea of me knitting seemed absurd now. "And you, Silas?" I asked, looking him in the eyes. "You are a free man. My mother's debt to you is paid. You could take your cut and disappear." Silas straightened his tie, looking affronted. "And miss the show? I think not. Besides, I made a terrible mistake once. I bought a queen when I should have served her. I intend to spend the rest of my life correcting that error." He placed his hand over his heart. "My sword is yours, mistress. Until the end," I nodded, accepting his oath. "Thank you, Silas." "Come," Serafina said, her voice soft. "Help me up." I rushed to her side, but she waved me off. She gripped the arms of her wheelchair and pushed. It was a struggle. Her arms shook, her face pale with effort, but she stood. She stood on her own feet, swaying slightly, but upright. "Mother," I whispered, reaching out to steady her. She took my arm, not for support, but to guide me. We walked together, slowly, out to the expansive terrace of the penthouse. The wind was strong up here, whipping my short hair across my face. The sun had set, and the city of Seattle was a sea of glittering lights below us. It was beautiful, it was vast, and it was mine. I reached up and touched the pendant at my throat, the storm's eye. The black sapphire seemed to drink in the city lights, pulsing with a dark, quiet power. Serafina leaned against the railing, looking at me. The wind caught her silver hair, making her look like a spirit of the air. "You have walked through the fire," she said. "You have been betrayed by family, sold by a lover, and hunted by wolves. You have lost your innocence. Jeanette." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "Tell me the truth," she asked. "Do you regret it? Do you regret the day you got in that car with Lance? Do you wish you were still the girl in the cubicle, dreaming of a small life?" I looked out at the horizon, where the dark water of the Sound met the sky. I thought about the fear in the container. I thought about the pain of the training. I thought about the blood on the refinery floor. But then I thought about the power. I thought about the ability to protect people like Sarah. I thought about the fear in Bishop's eyes when I took his gang without firing a shot. I thought about the justice I had served to Lance and Marcus. I had been a victim. Now, I was a force of nature. I turned to my mother, and a smile slow, confident, and dangerous spread across my face. "I do not regret being sold," I said, my voice carried by the wind, "because that price bought me a kingdom." Serafina smiled back, a look of pure triumph. She reached out and adjusted the pendant on my neck, centering the eye. "Then rule it," she whispered. "Long live the Queen." I turned back to the city, the lights reflecting in my eyes. The war with the Vipera clan was over, but in the shadows, new enemies were always waiting. New snakes would rise, new traitors would plot. Let them come. I was not Jeanette Norcross anymore. I was the Phoenix, and I was just getting started. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, revenge, and rising from the ashes. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a busy city like New York, a quiet town in Europe, or somewhere here in Asia? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed Jeanette's journey, please subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel. Smash that like button and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.